Well, together again.
We're at live
to tape. That's what they call this.
Yes. Live on the scene of Steamy LitCon.
We are at Steamy Lit, and it's very cool. It's very busy.
Yeah, it was really busy.
Mm-hmm.
So you did a panel today.
I did a panel this morning to celebrate 30 years of Beverly Jenkins's Night Song. It's her 30th anniversary of that book. And the panel was about historical romance, and it included a bunch of trailblazers.
Yeah, it was awesome.
It was really cool. It was Bev, and then Adriana Herrera, and Diana Quincy, and Jeannie Lynn, and Alyssa Cole, and I moderated. And it was really amazing.
Yeah, the room was packed. There were so many people.
It was huge and packed.
Yeah. I mean, to the point where usually if you've never been to a romance conference before, there's usually like a couple different things that happen, right? So there's the signings, which is, of course, everybody in a big room, and you get to go up to different tables and get book signed. And then there's, keynotes, which is kind of like everybody seeing the same thing at the same time. But then there's these breakout sessions, and usually they can be small. I mean, you know what I mean?
Yeah, like 40 or 50 people.
Yeah. And this room, we walked in and it was huge. And I thought, wow, this is a really big room. I hope everybody remembers to sit in the front. And then it filled up.
Yeah. I mean, easily 200 people. Possibly more.
Yeah.
And it was just awesome because we talked about historical, of course, through the lens of Beverly Jenkins books and her history in the genre, but also Adriana and Diana and Jeannie really gave this beautiful look at what it means to be first now.
Yeah.
On the heels of what Bev has done over the years. And it was really powerful, and it made me, I was really proud to be able to moderate it.
Yeah. And it was really fun because pretty much after the panel, the signing was this afternoon, and many, many people that came up to the table. So Sarah signed, and I just sort of like managed line and fanned people because it got hot and, yucked it up with people, basically.
We did our dog and pony show, but mainly it was just Jen doing the dog and pony show. I was trying to focus on spelling things correctly.
Yeah. But many people said how great it was. Thanked you for your moderation.
Yeah. But truthfully, Jen,
of course, these are people who
5 women who you can wind them up and let them go, and you would want to listen to them talk for a year.
Yeah, it was perfect.
I'm very happy to have moderated, but
yeah,
they didn't need me, but I was very happy to be there.
Well, everyone, welcome to Faded Mates.
I'm Sarah McLean. I read romance novels and I write them.
And you sign them.
And I sign them.
And I'm Jennifer Prokop, a romance reader and editor.
And sometimes you sign them.
Sometimes I sign them, yes. Although I always say so if you ever come up to us and ask us to sign things, if you ask me to sign something that is not one of Sarah's books, I will sign it. I'll say Faded Mates Forever and then Jen. If you ask me to sign something that is one of Sarah's books or occasionally Cressley's,
it should be Knockout because that's the one that's dedicated to Jen.
I will say, I didn't write this and then sign my name. So it was amazing to see so many readers today. It's really inspiring, honestly. I know how our virtual community of listeners feels, but there's something really powerful, too, about seeing these people in person.
Yeah.
We saw, Discord members, people that we've met several times. People who live locally, a really wonderful woman named Maria, who we have had,
Maria.
Maria, we love you. Just
took care of us.
So kind and took care of us. But then we also, and so we had a meeting with our Discord, kind of threw it out there. If you're at Steamy Lit, come hang out with us by the pool. And I'd say 25 or 30 people were there.
Yeah. And it was so amazing. P.S. When I left 2 hours into it, because I had to go and be somewhere else, they had opened up multiple packages of bracelet, like friendship bracelet making equipment, and they were just crafting. It was amazing.
Awesome. It was so fun. And then, but then like we met, like one of my favorite, there were a couple of really great stories from today. So one was, there was one woman who came up with an older woman, like, I mean, 77.
Oh my gosh.
Right? And so it turned out that this woman, so there's a younger woman.
76.
76. And this was her best friend's aunt. Is that correct?
Yes.
I think. Right. And basically, like, they, you know, she's known this woman for a really long time and got her started reading romance with one of your books.
Yeah. Yeah. She started with
Born.
with Born, which is hilarious. The first in the Casino series. And she started when she was 74. And she kept saying, you know, it's never too late.
It was awesome.
And she was great.
Yeah. She doesn't listen to the podcast because she is hard of hearing. And so she said, like, that's not something she can really do. But she was so cute. So we, you know, you signed for her. Like, we, you know, you took pictures. We took pictures with, you know, I actually joined in for a while. And then you went back to signing for the next people. And you didn't see this part. They walked away. And the older woman said to her, like, younger friend, like, that was amazing. And it was just like the best thing.
It was amazing. It was so fun. I'm going to tell my story too about Brazen and the Beast.
Yes.
One woman, oh my God, you guys. It was real early too. The signing started and she was, you know, in the first half hour of people. And I mean, like, thank you to everybody who came and stood in line. Like, the line was long and people were so patient. Yeah. And people stood in line and I feel really blessed. Like, I signed books for 5 straight hours. So a woman right early came over and she had a copy of Brazen and the Beast in her hands. And she was like, this is the only one of your books that I have not had signed. Would you please sign it? And I said, sure. And she said, I can never read it. And I was like, what? Why? What? And in my head, I'm sort of thinking, like, what is wrong with, like, what is it about this book that would be impossible? And she said, my children's names are Wit and Hattie. And I literally was like, what? That's crazy. How is that possible? And then she told me the funniest story. She said, and I told someone, well, maybe I'll just skip the sex scenes. And they said, well, enjoy your pamphlets.
Which is amazing.
But I mean, I can imagine reading a book where, like, one of the characters' names is your child's name, but both? No, absolutely not.
Cannot be done.
But I mean, she bought the book anyway, which I think is...
I feel like what you need to do is like, okay, here's what you need to do. You need to contact Sarah and maybe we can send you
maybe we find and replace. That's a great idea. We could find and replace their names for you.
Yeah, and then you would just read the book and have it not be Wit and Hattie. It could just be, you know,
God,
Malcolm and Nancy.
Listen, it's not the first time I've heard from a reader, and myself, sometimes I feel like reading a book where, like, you know, somebody with the name of the main character, it like becomes, it can be
difficult, right?
Wouldn't it be funny if, like, every book were also, like, available with different names?
Yeah. No, I'm serious. Okay, if we just came up with a great idea.
Instead of Wit and Hattie, it's like Adam and Joan.
Email Adam and Eve. Email Sarah at sarah@fatedmates.net. And I am obsessed with this idea. We're going to get you.
We're going to get you a copy. We'll get you
find and replace.
You can pick the names. Document with the names of your choice.
Amazing. Be like,
and that stands for anybody who has 2 children who are named for the hero and heroine of one of my books. I will do this for you.
Rocky and Adrian. Fine. It's a real deep cut, everybody. Okay. So today, everyone knows that as a season of Fated Mates comes to a close, one of the things that has conveniently happened is that Sarah has a book out.
Correct.
And so the first time we did it was for Brazen and the Beast. And I was like, oh, this is really fun. Like, I'm going to be like your hype woman. And, you know, it was just like a really fun episode. And so then at some point we did think like we should go back and, you know, kind of do other episodes. And for whatever reason, we did 9 rules.
Because I had a reissue.
That's right. There was a reissue. So we did 9 rules. But one of the things that I think has always like bothered us with this like endeavor is that we did Brazen and Daring, but we never did Wicked and the Wallflower.
Correct.
So as our last read along for this season, even though it's not exactly the last episode, we're going to do our last read along for Wicked and the Wallflower and just like visit the Wayback Machine of Sarah's brain.
I'm so excited about this, but also slightly nervous because I have not thought about Wicked and the Wallflower in a very, very long time.
Well, let me tell you a story, Sarah.
Okay.
Which is, and obviously Sarah's mostly going to talk. This is a really good example of the kind of book that we talk about a lot, which is you read it and you like it, but you don't think it's going to be one of your favorites. And then it becomes one of your favorites. And that is what Wicked and the Wallflower is for me.
Huh.
And one of the things I'm not sure that let's visit the other Wayback Machine to talk about the pandemic. One of the things I did during the pandemic was I did an truly insane number of puzzles.
I remember.
Right? Like that was a really big thing for me because I wasn't on a screen and I was with kids on Zoom all day and I did a lot of puzzles and I always listened to audiobooks. And it was re-listening to Wicked and the Wallflower in audio that made me realize like, I love this book. And it's not that I didn't love it the first time I read it, but it has gained, I don't know, like, right, some sort of, yeah, it's like a book I think of often. There's parts of it I really like, and I'm really excited to talk about it for that reason, because it's not often that I have the opportunity to revisit a book that like that. No. If that makes sense.
And also, I feel like it's important for everybody to understand that we don't talk about my books.
Yes.
Ever.
That's true.
We don't talk about them while I'm writing them. We don't talk about them after I've written them. Like, we have one episode and then that's it. We never talk about it again.
Right. Because Sarah doesn't like talking about her books, a weirdo. So anyway, okay, can I tell one other really funny story? So one of the other awesome things about today is people are so creative.
Oh my God.
And they're
so creative.
Right. Like we saw those sisters where one of them like essentially like bedazzled like the cover and then like made glittery sprayed edges. You will see this on our Instagram.
It was so cool. Y'all, it was, so she had One Good Earl Deserves a Lover. One day we will do a deep dive on that. Yeah. And her sister had bedazzled the whole title and painted the edges this like glittery blue, hand painted.
Yes.
And it was magnificent.
That was so cool.
All I want now is for romance novels to have glittery edges.
Yeah. No, it was awesome. So anyway, here's the funny part. So at one point I said to Sarah, people are so creative. And she was like, I know. Can you believe it? And I was like, bitch, you write books.
It doesn't feel creative, though. It doesn't feel creative the way like
glitter
coming up with glitter edges and bedazzling things. And oh my God, Shannon Donahue, who listens to the podcast, she was at the panel this morning.
Oh, yeah. It's amazing.
And while she was at the panel, she like courtroom illustrated us, which was
so cool.
Unbelievable. We look amazing in it. And like, she hand lettered like a bunch of quotes from Bev, and we're all across the bottom of her illustration is like a little sketch of us all up on the dais. And I mean, people are so creative.
Yeah, right. Well, and so are you. So anyway, one last shout out to Sam, who was our line leader today, essentially.
Terrific.
Sam, we love you.
Sam, I already miss you.
Yeah. And I was like, I'm not going to be there tomorrow. We should have told Sam to come back. Anyway, just be me. All right. So enough about Steamy Lit. It's super fun. It's been great. This week's episode of Fated Mates is brought to you by Kayla Gross, author of Silver Foxed.
So this one is really, really adorable. Our heroine, Alex, is having a real rough time. She's a curvy girl just trying to get by in the world, and she needs like one weekend of just calm idle. And wouldn't you know it, her parents have this beautiful lake house like in this idyllic space in the middle of nowhere. And she decides she's going to take herself up there thanks to her mom's offer and just have a weekend getaway to herself. Of course, she gets there and her father's best friend and business partner, Elijah, is also in this house because he too needed the weekend off and her father offered the house to him.
Mhm.
Now, listen, these two have been dancing around each other for a long time. Alex has had the hots for Elijah forever, and she offers him one sexy weekend. No strings attached. No one ever has to know, but maybe they could just like get it out of their system this weekend and never, ever tell her parents. This is incredibly sexy. Kayla Gross really knows how to do the one-handed read. And even better, Elijah has this like very sexy, like my wife thing where he has like a kink where like he wants to pretend like they're married and like that they're partnered. And so they like pretend to be in love and it's really emotional and sexy and pretty chef's kiss, I gotta say.
I hope other kinds of kissing too. Everyone, you can check out Silver Fox with your monthly subscription to Kindle Unlimited. And if your podcasting app supports it, you can click on the chapter title right now to be taken to buy the book.
And as a special treat for Fated Mates listeners, Kayla has offered us a little snippet of the audiobook of Silver Fox at the end of this episode. So stay tuned for that.
Thank you to Kayla Gross for sponsoring this week's episode. This is a book that's setting up a series, not just this romance between Devil and Felicity.
Yes.
And you're also pulling in a character that was not really, I think, on our radar as being someone who was going to show up again necessarily.
Right, because she's in Day of the Duchess. She's one of the... So the Day of the Duchess is a... it's basically it's like The Bachelor. The heroine of Day of the Duchess is trying to find the hero of Day of the Duchess a new wife so that he'll give her a divorce. And so they have a country house party and a bunch of very poor matches for him arrive. Right. And Felicity is one of them. And she becomes the match that the heroine of Day of the Duchess ultimately thinks like is the best match for the Duke in that book. But Felicity's like, I don't want this. And he's like, well, I really don't want this. And then, but I always have found that there's always like some lingering character from the series before who needs to be pulled forward.
Yeah.
And this was Felicity.
One of the way that Wicked and the Wallflower opens is with this pretty dramatic, like
fairy tale.
Yes. Yeah. 4 children born on the same day to the same man, right?
4 children on same day, same hour, same minute.
Yes.
3 boys born on the same day, same hour, same minute to the same man. And then, so there was no knowledge of which of them was first. Right. So none of them could inherit. And then a 4th child who is, a different character altogether.
Right.
But the idea originally was that this series, when I conceived of it, was going to be my homage to fairy tales. So I was like, Wicked and the Wallflower, and I conceived of it as a really strong 3-book arc. Like I knew the end. I knew the end of the 3 books long before I knew really very much else about anything. I really loved the idea of this kind of like this fairy tale brotherhood, like brothers pitted against each other, a kind of traumatic Hunger Games style like experience for them. But I also really wanted each of the books to feel like a fairy tale, right? So this was a retelling. The concept was it would be a retelling of Rumplestiltskin. And then Brazen and the Beast would, of course, be a Beauty and the Beast retelling. And then I didn't know what Daring and the Duke would become. And I had like a bunch of different ideas. But that's really irrelevant at this point. You can go listen to that episode after this. But so for me, it was important that these 3 boys, we as readers felt like they were fated. And there was never a moment when their destinies were not going to be entwined.
Right.
And then, yeah, it was devil and beast against Ewan.
Right. So one of the things, though, that's really interesting. So I was thinking about this is when Sarah teaches a really great class on conflict. And you've heard us use this language before of like the storytelling engine, right? And that plot and conflict is the gas in that engine.
Mm-hmm.
And so one of the things that I'm going to tell you, because after reading the whole series, it sort of became a little clearer to me why Wicked and the Wallflower. At first, I was kind of like, I'm not sure, right? Is because it is putting a tremendous amount of gas in the tank and it doesn't all get used. Mm-hmm. So because you're saving it, like, where that gas has to burn down a dukedom at the end of 3.
Yeah.
Right. And a spoiler alert, everybody. So, and I think like looking back, I was like,
it's all on the page.
It's all there, but it's not all used. And that's like unusual, right? So I was kind of like, what, this book feels different.
And it's interesting because it's not the first time I did that. In fact, I had done it in 2 series before.
Yeah, but it is the first time that I read that series
in order,
one at a time.
Interesting.
As opposed to they were all done and I could read them so much faster, right? And kind of see the artistry.
Yeah.
So I think that, right, like I read this, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
does that make sense?
Book ends and there is still a villain.
Yes.
The villain is not vanquished because ultimately he will be vanquished in the 3rd book as the hero.
By love. Right.
Yeah.
So that's one of the things that I was curious to have you talk about a little bit, which is how do you not only build like enough gas in the tank for their romance, but enough gas in the tank for a series?
I mean, it does feel like part of it is inspiration from other books, right? Like, this is not an uncommon way for example, a paranormal series to have been built. And I think in order to like fully understand what I was doing or how I was thinking about crafting it and how I continue to think about crafting series, you kind of have to go back to the Casino series because that whole series was conceived after I had read one after another of J.R. Ward's Black Dagger Brotherhood. And so really had a sense of like, how do you take this kind of ever-expanding world where the bad guy isn't vanquished all the time, and sometimes a character who is perceived as bad is actually good, and turn it around and land it properly in historical with a closed ending, right? Like one of the things I never, ever, ever want to do, I had learned my lesson, I really felt, in the Casino series, because by the time I was finished with the 4th book, I was like, I'm ready to be done with these people.
Yeah.
So I knew, I know that I will, I mean, never say never, I guess, but all of my series close. They have a very clear ending because I can't imagine doing it open-ended.
Right.
But for this series, it felt like, so I had done it there. I had done it even a little bit in Scandal and Scoundrel, where we see Serafina Amal, the hero and heroine of Day of the Duchess, really like their romance begins in chapter 1 of the 1st book of that series.
Right.
And the gas never gets fully used, right?
Right.
So I think for me, it's really about trusting the reader to come with me on the journey and stay with me. But that's really hard.
Yeah.
I mean, and I think the Casino series, I was very lucky in that because of time and the way that bookstores existed and everything, it was like a very different time for readers. And they were they were invested in historicals in a different way, like willing to wait for the series. But I really think like for this book, for this series, the gas, I mean, Ewan was a villain and I knew I was going to turn him around, but the problem is like, you can't pull the punch.
Right.
Yeah. He needs to be a villain until it's time for his book. And so to answer your question, I think that was like inspired a lot by Cressley, by J.R. Ward, by others who like did not pull the punch. Lothair is fucking terrible.
Yes.
Until he's not.
Yeah. So why start with devil? So if you have devil, beast, right? Like what makes Devil's book the first book out of the two of them?
I wanted to write my devil. We talked about this, right?
Yeah.
So obviously the Duke, if the concept of the series is these three brothers are put through like a Hunger Games style battle for the dukedom, then the Duke obviously is the end.
Right.
That's end game. So that's easy. And then the split between them was, I think it was two things. I really wanted to write
Tommy Shelby.
I mean, always I really want to write Tommy Shelby. I wanted to write my devil, but I also felt like I knew one of them was going to be the brains of the operation and one of them was going to be the brawn.
Mm-hmm.
And it felt like the brains was the right place to start. And it also felt like I knew like one of them was going to be scarred and one of them was going to be like, I sort of knew that Beast was going to be the most beautiful thing anybody had ever seen.
Sure.
Right. And like, so I wanted to start with the scarred hero. I wanted to start and really establish, especially when you're writing a crime ring, when you're writing a series like this that has like archetypal figures as heroes, there's a real sense of like, I need to build world in the first book.
Right.
You know, you come at historicals like fantasy, especially a series like this. First book is about world building in fantasy.
Right.
What are the rules? Who are the players? What are the politics? How does society work? Who has power? Who doesn't? And Devil owns that space. Like he is the one who runs Bareknuckle Bastards.
Right.
Wit is the muscle.
Yeah, and the nice one, right? Like there's a scene
And
in the
he's
beginning
very fun.
where like the little girls are like, "Are we gonna have lemon ice?" And he's like, "We don't say ice, but yes." That's not how he says it, but that's how I said it in my brain, right?
Wit's such a like sweet baby.
Sure.
Until somebody touches what he loves, and then he'll fuck you up.
Sure. I mean, as it should be, right? And same with Devil, but in a different way, right? So
Devil will scare the shit out of you, though.
yeah, I mean, and like
if you meet Devil on a dark street, you're scared to death.
I mean, that's a nice transition to both this question about darkness, which we'll get to in a second, but also for me to fangirl over one of my all-time favorite scenes in all of romance.
The alleyway.
Yes.
I'm really proud of that scene.
Right?
That might be the scene I'm most proud of that I've ever written.
So Felicity essentially picks the lock into his room and they have she gets in the bath and thinks she's going to run away and she doesn't, right? There's this amazing scene, like the tension between them, right? And he pisses her off. And she's like, all right, well, I'll wait for you out here, and then leaves. But when she exits,
she exits into like
the wrong
Covent
way.
Garden, like into a very dangerous part, like the close to the rookeries where he could walk any day, anytime, and never ever be harmed. But like, here's this like
beautiful
wallflower,
right? Wealthy. They could tell by her clothing.
She's never ever been afraid of anything ever in her life, and she's going to get eaten alive by this place.
Right.
And he's terrified because he played chicken with her.
Yeah,
and she won.
Right. So yeah, it's an amazing scene. I reread it this morning and was just like, this is everything I want in romance, because it establishes that he's going to do whatever to take care of her. He doesn't even realize himself how he feels about her. But then there's this amazing scene where, she's like, nobody's here but us.
Right. They're in a dark alley.
Right.
And there's no one there.
Right. And you're
in her point of view.
Right. And then he taps his cane.
Oh, it's a cane. Yeah.
He taps it's a sword cane, of course.
Right? He does a lot of tapping, that cane.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. And that's how he signals, right, to everyone, essentially.
It's terrifying.
Yeah. Right. It's listen, if it was the Midwest, his cane would be a tornado siren, right? And everybody hears it and knows he is calling them, right? They have to call.
Yeah, if you hear the tap of the cane, it means Devil's pissed or he has something to say.
Yeah. And then it's like they all appear and they tap back.
Yeah, he taps, he speaks to the
Yeah.
darkness. He says, like, she's under my protection.
And then
right? No one touches her. And she's like, what the fuck? Like, you're a crazy person.
Right. She belongs to me.
She belongs, you shall call her mine.
I was like, excuse me. Clarification. She belongs to me is also what he says. Let's make sure we get that on record.
Alec Kincaid's supremacy leaking directly into my book.
And I wasn't mad. And she was like, who are you what are you talking about? And who are you talking to?
Right. Yeah, she's like, there's no one here. Like, what are you trying to prove? And then he whacks his cane on the ground and like everywhere it just thunders back a repeat. Like everybody has heard and she had no idea.
It was amazing. Yeah, it's a great scene.
It's a scene I'm very proud of because in my head I can just
it's cinematic. Yeah, it really is.
And then she's like, are you going to take me back to the to the road for me to get, are you going to see me into a cab? And he's like, you don't need me anymore.
No,
you're go do what you want.
As safe as you could possibly be here forever now because I've claimed you. You may call her mine. I'm fine, everybody.
This week's episode of Fated Mates is sponsored by 1001 Dark Nights, publishers of Lexi Blake's The Bodyguard and The Bombshell. I love this title, by the way.
I love Lexi Blake. So Nate Carter left his elite military unit after a tragic accident. He's Australian, and so he just needs to start over. So he takes a job in the States with his father's former employer, McKay Taggart, who offers him a position in the bodyguard unit. And Nate is not thinking like, oh, I'm dying to protect rich people and celebrities, but he has a certain skill set, Sarah. So he is also hoping to reconnect with old friends, including Daisy O'Donnell, who's his best friend's younger sister, just practically his own younger sister, except when they meet this time around, he feels something different for her.
He's not feeling so brotherly.
No, he isn't. So Daisy is just like chaos personified. And wouldn't you know, Sarah, that she has need of a bodyguard?
That happens to me all the time, too. Hot Australian ones, especially.
Sure. Thrown together by danger and, definitely feeling like they should not give in to the insane chemistry between them. They are really swept away on an adventure. And when his past and her present collide, they have to decide if they can hold it together or go their separate ways forever.
Well, you can read this very sexy bodyguard romance right now in print or ebook. And if your podcasting app supports it, you can click on the chapter title to be taken to buy the book. Thanks to 1001 Dark Nights and Lexi Blake for sponsoring this week's episode.
So let's talk about, we're going to get back to Felicity, I promise everybody. But let's talk about...
What a fuckboy. I love him.
Oh, God, it's so true. Let's talk about the darkness, right? Because the other thing and this I think we probably have mentioned before, but it's worthwhile talking about again, is this is a book that takes place entirely at night, essentially.
Yeah, there's one scene in the daylight.
Yeah. So what, and here's the other thing I'll say is also... Intentionally, of course, but thematically, I think this book also really plays around a lot with these opposites, right? So darkness and light and at one point he tells her it's better to be first in hell than simmering in heaven, moth to flame, safety, danger, wants and needs, right? There's all these ways in which there's these really strong contrasts, right? And she of course is someone who should be in the light, who should be in safety, who should be in heaven. And instead, she is so drawn to his world, right? And who she can be in it. So at what point did you envision the darkness as being this is how this book has to be written? Is it something that evolved over time or you knew all along this is a book of the night?
I mean, I think anybody who reads my books and loves them or knows them well enough can see that I really love darkness. I love the cinematic experience of like, I love a rooftop. I love people like being in darkness. I love dark corners and like hiding and secrets and all of that. So there was that, but I remember feeling very clearly as I was writing this series, like thinking about it as a triptych in a lot of ways, right? And so the first one would be almost entirely in the dark, and then the second one would split the difference, and then the third one would be much more in the light. And the sort of this idea that finally these three boys had found their way to like leaving the past behind them. And so, but also like devil's afraid of the dark, right? Like he's king of the dark, but also like terrified of like what lurks there because he has, been through a terrible trauma as a child. And so for me, like there's a romance to the darkness for me as a reader. Like these are the kind of heroes that I really love. Like this whole series was really a love letter to the books that I loved when I was, came to romance. It was me finding that again. So I guess the answer is I knew pretty quickly that I was going to play with light and dark, and I continued to do that. Right. So, yeah. Okay. Like metonymy is here, right? Like, right. It's dark because he is darkness. She is light. Yes. Like, sure. And Felicity swallows her. Right? Yeah, like it's all Felicity Fairclough.
Name is destiny.
I know. I remember at some point, like early days, there was a review and it was like, I don't understand. Like he uses her name, like her full name all the time. And she just said, it sounds like a fairy tale name, like a dumb fairy tale name. And I'm like, yeah, that's the point. Like name is destiny.
You're like, you got it. You're so close. Right.
But I think Devil, I don't even know what Devil would look like in the sunlight. Right. Pale.
Yeah, like vampiric almost. Right?
I don't even know what Devil does in the sunlight.
Right? Like back to J.R. Ward there.
Yeah.
Well, okay, so this is a good transition to talking about Felicity, who's like one of the things that's interesting about Felicity, right, is that in the beginning, she realizes that she has been kept in the dark by her family. Right. And so essentially, they're at, the Duke of Marwick. Is that what the fuck is his name?
I don't know. Why would I know that, Jen? You're talking about Ewan.
Yes.
All right.
Marwick?
That sounds right.
Okay. Sorry. Marwick.
Okay. Oh, when I said I hadn't read it or thought about it in a long time. Okay.
So so essentially the way they meet, right, is there's this ball at the Duke of Marwick, and this has set Devil and Beast up because the deal was
Marwick is their brother, who won
this Hunger Games thing,
betrayed them and won,
right? And they essentially were like, we're going to leave him alone as long as he does not try to get any heirs. That will be like that, right?
A real classic. The line ends with us.
Yes.
Right.
We're not going to do this anymore. And he essentially like opens up Marwick House and announces that he is open to looking for a duchess. And they immediately respond. And as soon as Devil sees him again, right, he realizes, oh, you wanted us to respond because what Ewan wants is he wants to find Grace, right? And so Felicity essentially is like every other young, unmarriageable woman, right? Expected to try and land this Duke. And she's on the shelf. She's 27. And she has been really thrown over by her friends. This is another thing that I found really interesting about her. And I think hard to read in some ways because of my very personal like lifestyle, which is like I teach 7th graders, and there are ways in which like popularity is the currency of middle school
and of
the aristocracy, right? But it's so plain. It's so plain because it is so on the surface for her. She had been kicked out of her group of like mean friends. She had been cast aside by society. She doesn't really quite know why. And it's not until she sort of gets home after doing something very foolish, which is boasting to them, like, well, you can try and catch him all you want. I've already landed him. Right? And it's,
I mean, but who among us hasn't said something stupid like that in the middle of, like, just a flat out
just
piece of bullshit because we didn't know what else to say.
Right. And you're kind of like, but it's like one of the things that's really interesting about it is you're kind of like, what? Oh no. The very thing you want, which is to like just get back in with these people, to be back in, you have just done the very thing that's going to make that impossible.
Right. You want to string, you told those girls that you could spin straw into gold.
Yep. Right.
And now you're fucked.
Now you got to go do it.
Yeah.
Right. And one of the things she doesn't realize till she gets home is her family is broke.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So, and it also, the other part that's really interesting is it then illuminates something about like why she was in that position of being in The Bachelor in the first place.
Right.
So as I was rereading for this, it's so hard to let characters be clueless, oblivious, a little craven, right?
Mm-hmm.
Kind of desperate.
Mm-hmm.
And Felicity starts out in a bad spot.
Mm-hmm.
So how, and I would say in a way that most of us would find, like sometimes a romance heroine's in a bad spot and you're like, tough, I wonder how that's going to work out. Felicity's in a bad spot in a way we can all understand.
Yeah.
Right? So
yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about her character
Mm-hmm.
building, especially from like you'd put her in, there was some backstory you had to stick with.
Well, yeah, I mean,
Right?
That's a craft thing, right? When you are somebody like me, who every single book I write is built on lore, right? Like it's all in the same universe. There are certain things that you've put on the page that you can't change.
Yes.
Right. And so Felicity had done this thing and there had to be a reason. And, and in Day of the Duchess, the Duke that they are all sort of vying for is married. Like, so there is a certain sense of like, and this is a girl, like already these girls are sort of in a pickle in some way, like, because who would throw their child into a competition to marry an already married Duke?
Right.
Who's going to have to divorce and then remarry, right?
Right.
So I think there was that. And in Day of the Duchess, I didn't really have to explain it, but then I had to explain it.
Right.
I also, and this is where it gets personal, my father passed away while I was writing this book. And he died maybe, I was half finished with it. And when people die in your life, often there are things that come out that are kind of surprising realities that you did not perceive when they were alive. Like they were really good at hiding them. Mm-hmm. And so I was really interested in both Felicity has a sister-in-law who is also surprised, like, and doesn't see, like, does not know the financial situation of the family. And she's sort of a character who doesn't appear very much, but then at the end, she sort of has what I think is a really powerful moment where she says straight up to Felicity's brother, like, you should have told me. Yeah. I could have stood with you in this. And Felicity never really says that. Like, she never says, like, I could have stood with you. Felicity's like, I got to fix this. Like, my job is to, like, save the day in a lot of ways. And so marrying this Duke, ultimately, Devil's Rumplestiltskin. He says, you did a bad thing. You made a promise you couldn't keep, but aren't you lucky because I can keep it for you? So Felicity makes a deal with the devil. But, like, Felicity's sister-in-law is like, what happened? Like, we're supposed to be in this together.
Yeah.
And I was thinking a lot about, like, what it is to be a child, a sister, a wife, and discover this kind of burden has been carried and you didn't know, and you could have helped.
Right.
At least shared it.
This week's episode of Fated Mates is brought to you by Serena Ackroyd, author of Broken.
This one is really perfect for the dark and taboo romance listeners that we have out there. The hero of this book, Savio, is a Catholic priest who was abducted kind of just out of missionary by revolutionaries and forced to take their confessions for their many horrific acts and sins for many years. And when he finally escapes and is able to process the experience, he has lost all of his faith. He is really like without compass, and he finds compass in vigilante justice. And now he is kind of a priest who does the job and makes sure that bad men can't continue to act with impunity. So what happens, though, is his story is very public when he's rescued. And our heroine, Andrea, who is a savior in her own right, she works with kids who have been through really traumatic experiences, sees his story on the television and can't help but be drawn to it. And she writes him a letter that just says that she's thinking of him, and she understands, has some sort of understanding. And this begins a relationship between the two of them that is, really intense, really emotional, deeply traumatic, like very obsessive. And these two dance around each other. And I think this is going to really hit that sweet spot for our listeners who love, love, love a broken hero, a real taboo romance, and a layer of darkness that, will give them those big, scary feelings.
You can check out Broken with your monthly subscription to Kindle Unlimited, and if your podcasting app supports it, you can click on the chapter title right now to be taken to buy the book. Thanks to Serena Ackroyd for sponsoring this week's episode. The other thing about this series is, yes, Ewan is a duke, but this is not a series that is at all interested even in the aristocracy.
No, I was very done with the aristocracy.
Yes, you were done. And so Felicity is also a really interesting character to signal a departure.
Mm-hmm.
You're taking this.
Say more about that, Jen.
Let me tell you what you did there, Sarah, right? So you have this character, right, who at the beginning, all she wants is to be back in. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure a lot of readers are like, well, okay, well, she's going to get back in, right? And instead, it's this radical departure, right? So you're signaling something to the reader as well.
Yeah, well, so it's kind of reverse morality chain, but actually it's not, right? And what I mean by that is, in a traditional format, right? Like, she wants to get back in, so Devil would somehow do something to get himself like accepted in some way into society, yes. Right? Like a kind of real Claypassian hero.
I'll get in,
movement,
so we'll be in.
Right? Like, so then we'll be able to go to the balls and you'll be the popular girl and it'll all be perfect and everyone will love you. But one of the other things that I was really interested in playing with this series, and you hit it on the head with like, this isn't about the aristocracy at all, this series. I mean, it is a lot about the aristocracy because it's about me saying like, hey, what we venerate is not the right, we are venerating the wrong thing. And so during this time, I was doing a lot of research because, I really pulled this whole series out of Mayfair. Like this series lives in the East End of London, like a very different kind of place. And I was doing a lot of research at the Museum of London. There are these incredible maps in the late 1800s. A sociologist went through the East End of London block by block and basically like measured the poverty levels. Mm. And so I was looking at all of these maps and I was thinking so much about like these people who were the working poor and the people who, and I started to think about like, what is the difference between nobility and acting with nobility. Being noble and acting with nobility. Like those two things are not the same. And like we talk about colonialism, we talk about all these things, and like they really aren't the same. And so I started to think about like who are the people who built the city that then we like love to play in as romance readers. And so when I say reverse morality chain, Devil and Wit and the Bastards, like, yes, they're criminals, but they're the most noble people in the book.
Right. Well, and this is right. One of my sort of questions is,
and so he pulls Felicity to him.
Right.
And instead of it being like a dark romance, right, where we talk about dark romance, like pulls the heroine down into,
right,
you know, the crime, and then like they live in darkness. He pulls Felicity from Mayfair to Covent Garden, but like it's once she gets there, there is light.
Yeah, right. Okay. In early historical romance, there's not really a concern for like the duchy. You know what I mean? And that has been something that I think we've seen evolve over time, right? Like, so if you look at Cold Hearted Rake by Clapis, right? We get Devon and West, Ravenel really like being very concerned about like the land, the tenants, right?
Yeah.
And in some ways, I feel like this is your book where the concern, right? The dukes should care about the tenants of London, right? But the real people, the real aristocrats of London are the Bareknuckle Bastards, right? That they are truly aristocratic in their concern for community and truly care about the like there's a point where, you know, Devil's kind of like, you know, has the baby come yet? And right, like there's all these ways in which these people are truly known
community. Yeah, they're heroines, right? Like if you're thinking about it in terms of the Gail Carriger sense of like what is the heroine's journey? The journey of the heroine is to community. Like Wit and Devil are heroines,
right? Like, and so, but that's also what buys them this extreme loyalty. Right. So,
I mean, people would lay down in front of traffic for them.
Right. And so there's no way for Ewan to get in.
Right.
Right. Which is like also the perfect setup because the normal levers that a duke, right, an aristocrat can pull or push, right? I can use my money. I can buy these people off. There is no way in.
Right. Which is why, and we've already done an episode on Daring and the Duke, but like one of my favorite scenes from that is when he's forced to carry the ice.
Yeah.
You know, and he's just like bloodying himself, hauling ice to prove that like he too can get down there and do work.
Right. Yeah. So so that I think it is like then, right? So Felicity is back in, right? She gets in. It's just not into the aristocracy that she thought she would.
No, I mean, she becomes queen of London, right? Like,
right. In a very different way. Okay. So one of the things I want to like sort of wrap up this character talk, I was reading this really interesting essay, which I'm going to share with you later because you will also think it's interesting. Adriana, I'll send it to you too. Called Sanctimony Literature by a woman named, a critic named Becca Rothfeld. And one of the conversations I think we've had a lot, right? Just like ongoing is like, when did characters become pious, right? Like, you know what I mean? Like characters aren't very interesting in some ways that they're sort of like, I'm good and good, you know, good people don't mix with bad people. That's what we know about them. And I think clearly dates back to 2016 and the election and a lot of the ways in which like and I think reading this essay made me realize like it's not just happening in romance, right?
Right.
This is something that's happening writ large. But what she talks about in this essay is that in this sanctimony literature, right, that characters become good people or bad people. And what this critic says is, in fact, what they should be studying is the good and the bad in all people, the full mark of human motivation, the tangle of tensions and contradictions, of desires and principles that is the permanent condition of human choice. And I just thought it was so perfect for this book in particular, for thinking about all of the ways in which Devil and Felicity and the cast of characters are really torn between, I mean, he is a criminal who cares, you know what right? Like there's all these ways in which If you just sort of like were to line up these pieces, maybe they wouldn't fit.
Right.
But everything is tangled up in a really interesting way. Right?
Yeah. I mean, I think that that's the joy of writing this series was very much taught. I mean, once you decide that you're going to throw out the concept of like, you know, criminal activity equals bad.
Right.
Right. I mean, what they're doing is very revolutionary, right? They're very clearly what they are smuggling into London is, yes, vice, but also like there's all sorts of stuff that's in there that's taxed for no reason.
Right.
Right? Like playing cards and things that like
Wigs.
absolutely shouldn't be taxed. Yeah, makeup.
Yeah.
Alcohol, like things that are taxed because the rich can tax them and the poor have to bear the burden.
Yeah.
It's the aristocracy would never have brought clean water to that end of London at that time, but Devil and Wit make sure that it's there.
Yeah.
And children learn to read. Like they are pious in so many, like they're like, they don't go to church. Oh my God, they would burn on fire if they walked into a church. But like, they are protecting their flock in a way that
right.
no one else is.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, but also they're terrible. They can absolutely kill a man with one blow.
Right. Right.
And would.
Yeah, if it meant protecting whatever. Right, protecting the ice, protecting the, right?
But like when we talk about heroes should be kings, I say it all the time, right? Heroes should be kings. This is what I want. Like, yeah. I know that we're in this position, we're in this place in 2024 where heroes, in so many ways, so many heroes feel like post-feminist,
right?
Right, like we've solved patriarchy, right? Like post-patriarchy, and these heroes are like soft and gooey and lovely, and they read romance novels, and they like are evolved in every perfect way, right? And they're like great dudes who you would absolutely like be thrilled to date. But the reality is like, for me, God, Devil is like pure patriarchy,
sure,
but also like really he evolves so much,
yeah.
But he also comes through at the beginning as like, he is the king and he is benevolent.
Yes. Right. But he is not afraid of his own power, right? He's like, I worked really hard for it.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, so that's it. It's like pure patriarchy, but like sort of in the sense of him saying like, I worked really hard for this power and I'm going to do whatever I can to keep it, because then I get to do what I want. I get to keep safe what I want. I get to, make the money I want.
Yeah, and I mean, the reality is that the best moment of any romance novel is the moment where a hero like Devil, whose unwillingness to sacrifice like his kingdom. I mean, Devil, he would never give it up. Like,
no.
And for lots of reasons, like he would never give up because he knows what it's like to be without it. He knows what it's like to be powerless. He's experienced it. He was an orphan. This is his community. Like, he has a million different ways that he wouldn't have given it up. But like the best moment in any romance novel is the moment where the hero is like, I'll give it up. I'll give it up for you.
Right.
For love.
For love.
If this is what it takes.
Yeah.
If it takes giving it all up and like literally dying, in Devil's case, literally dying.
Yeah.
For Felicity.
Right.
He'll do it.
I think one of the things too is like as a romance reader, you're always like, are they really a good match? Right? How can someone who, Felicity, who is it's seemingly desperate for the, acceptance of people she literally doesn't like, right? Be a perfect match for someone with this kind of strength. But I think he just sees beyond all that. Like, you just don't know that. It's almost like she doesn't know there's another way. And that's what he shows her, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I think like that, their relationship in that sense is very powerful. Whereas, she literally unlocks him. You know what I mean? So, so in that sense, they are like many of your characters, I think, you know, you see them at the beginning, you're like, how can this ever possibly be? Right. And the whole setup, I mean, we haven't really talked about the plot. I mean, because it's, you know, I don't want to spoil anything, but like the whole setup is, right. I mean, that's the thing. When you make the deal with Rumplestiltskin, there's a price to pay. And she does not know what that's going to be. But what you know, he's like, I'll just ruin her. I'm going to ruin every woman Ewan thinks he's going to be with.
Right.
That's what it will take.
Sets out to ruin. He's planning to just like seduce her.
Yeah.
And ruin her publicly.
Right. And he's like, man,
what a big dummy.
You know, she's already kind of ruined. It's fine. You know, so it's really fascinating too, because the layers and layers and layers of like honesty and subterfuge that are happening at the same time. Right.
Oh, he's such a liar. Yeah.
Right. And yet we never really blame him for, I mean, it's fascinating how likable he is.
Yeah. Well, he's really silver-tongued too.
Yeah, literally.
But I think also the trick with writing criminals, right, is like you gotta write them great.
Yeah.
Like you gotta write them in a way that like any reader would just happily take their clothes off for them. This week's episode of Fated Mates is sponsored by Leslie Hatchell, author of Come Back to Me.
Skye Blaine is a modern woman with a very strange problem, Sarah, which is she has come across this portrait, an antique portrait of a rugged Scottish laird from the 16th century, and she feels just so drawn to him.
Yeah, me too.
We could tell that somehow this man is her destiny. And so using, you know, kind of mystical magic, the force of her own will, she figures out a way to time travel back to Scotland in 1562. But this is, she's got some challenges ahead of her. Obviously, just, you know, time travel itself, them being completely different people. But there's also a woman named Davinia who is convinced that Ian is hers and is not looking for this strange outsider and interloper to be moving in on her man. So in this 3-book series, Skye and Ian are going to face a huge number of problems trying to make this big Outlander-like situation they're in work out to their benefit.
Well, this one's obviously for anyone who loves a time travel romance or loves a medieval romance or loves, you know, falling in love with paintings. You can read Come Back to Me right now in print, ebook, or with your monthly subscription to Kindle Unlimited. Thanks to Leslie Hatchell for sponsoring this week's episode and for her generous donation to the Romancing the Vote auction, which won her this ad. I really love a hero who is just flat out flummoxed by a heroine. Like when he comes upon Felicity basically breaking into his warehouse because he has refused to help her. And she's like, well, then fuck that. I'm going to figure it out on my own. There's an this is also history. Like, this is true. There was a time in history when there was something called perfect security, and that there was a lock that was basically unpickable. It was called the Chubb lock. And so much so that they hung a Chubb lock in the window of a locksmith's, store in London, and offered £10,000 to anybody who could pick it. And it was impossible. It took years before somebody could. And so I was like, well, I'm going to put a Chubb lock in here and Felicity's going to be able to undo it. And that's it, right? Devil is the Chubb lock.
Right.
And he is livid, but also is hot. Fascinated by her.
Well, and one of my favorite lines in this book is she sees him too, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there's one part where he kind of twirls for her almost, right?
Love this.
I love this, right? He, Devil had always loved the female gaze upon him, right? And that's a really, he's a bit of a dandy, right? He really...
Oh, he has great clothes.
Oh, yeah, right? He has, real closely shaved hair. And she at one point asked him, who does that to you? And He's like, well, a woman I trust. She's like, oh yeah, does she know you're here with me? I mean, and so that they're really like at first blush, you're kind of like, how, right? How is someone so confident going to be interested in someone who really is a, a like adrift,
Yeah, she doesn't
right?
she doesn't have a plan.
Yeah. And so it's fascinating to watch him, like sort of reel her in, but then like teach her this, like, I mean, essentially it turns the whole world upside down, like that's kind of how I always think about this book. Like you have Felicity in like the snow globe or whatever, and then it's just like it's turned upside down and like it's like a whole new world. A couple last questions before we wrap up. So you mentioned the Chubb lock. I also know that you have talked about like the research you did in the ice trade, right? And so one of the things that's always really interesting is like in historical research is like what came first, like the chicken or the egg or the lockpick or the ice. And like, how did lockpicking and ice go together? Or like, how did you, I don't know if you can remember that. Like,
I remember both.
okay.
Yeah. So ice came from Frozen. I had a
Amazing.
5-year-old.
Amazing.
And I was like watching a lot of Frozen and watching, at the very, very beginning of Frozen. I don't know if you've ever seen Frozen.
I haven't. I was past that time.
But at the very, very beginning of Frozen, like the overture of Frozen is they're in Norway and it's like setting the scene.
Mm-hmm.
And it is like dudes like hooking ice blocks out of the glacier and carrying them. And I remember being like, I wonder how ice traveled. Like I knew there was refrigeration, like, and I knew that like in London in the Regency, there's a very famous, Bridgerton watchers will remember, a very, very famous
Gunter's
ice shop, right? Gunter's. And so I was like, I wonder how they moved the ice though. Like, because there was no electric refrigeration. And so there's this great book, which I'll put in the show notes because I can't remember the name of it, but it's like something like the history of the ice trade. And it was really fascinating because they would load up these ships in Norway and like as close to the Arctic Circle as they could, and then ship them down knowing that they would lose 50% of the cargo to warmth.
Right.
And so those ships would, they would have to come up the Thames at high tide because the Thames is so shallow. Thank you. The Thames is so shallow that, if they didn't, they would drag on the bottom and get stuck. So they would come up at high tide. And the story goes that even then, like the water in the Thames would be almost at the top of the water. They'd be basically sunk, these ships, by the time they came up into London. And so I was really fascinated by the idea that like, what a logical way to smuggle things. Like if you can figure out how to like waterproof cargo, you would be able to essentially run the Bareknuckle Bastards. So that's where that came from. And then the Chubb lock came from a 99% Invisible episode that I listened to about perfect security.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, that would be really fascinating. What if I had a heroine who was a lockpick? And what if she wasn't a lockpick, like because she was a criminal? What if she was a lockpick because like it was something for her to control, like it was a compulsive tendency? And then I got really interested in, and obviously, I mean, like once you have a lockpick, then there's so much, like obviously the hero has to be impenetrable and to be unlocked, like suddenly, like
so many things, right?
Fills up. But I mean, I remember coming up with the end scene of this, like realizing that like, so there would be ice and then there would be an ice hold, obviously, where they would have to keep everything. And I remember thinking like, oh, well, she's going to see that door and see how many locks are on it and know like something really important is in there. Like, what does he keep in there? Mm-hmm. And then once I knew how many locks, like that there was just a door filled with locks, I was like, well, eventually she's going to have to open it. So what's in there?
Yeah. I think one of the other things that's sort of interesting to me is the other way that this book is a little bit of a departure, I guess, from the previous series, right, which was really tied together by these sisters, is that Felicity is a return to the lonely heroine.
Yeah.
Right? And yet that gets tempered in some really interesting ways, right? So on first meeting her, Dahlia, which of course we find is, the fourth, is Grace, invites her to, sort of come to 72 Shelton Street and
To fuck with her brother.
yeah, right.
Like,
but
not so that Felicity can fuck her brother. Like,
right.
but so, like Dahlia's like,
yeah.
Here's a fun way that I can fuck with Devil.
Yeah.
So come see me.
Right.
And Devil's like, a fucking bordello.
What? No, she's mine. I told her.
How very dare.
Why did you listen? But I think it's interesting that, and I don't know, like, was that purposeful? Like, to sort of signal to Felicity, like, you won't be alone in this, you know what I mean? Like, her mother is very, like, oh, Felicity, like, of course you have to just marry whoever, you know what I mean? Like, every time her mother comes on stage, I just imagine her, like, sort of being, like, trilling and a little silly and, right, like, not really sure how to handle things. And so I was really fascinated by the idea that, like, Felicity is alone, but she's very quickly shown a sort of model of womanhood, right? Like, along with, like, sort of Devil being like, you can join me in this way. What might that look like for her, right? So it's just and there's Nick, and there's some really interesting women in
That's
what I'm trying to say.
Because Devil might have like a Lieutenant Nick who is ultimately is important in the second book. I mean, again, building a series, you don't want to build too big of a cast in the beginning and get yourself stuck with like, oh, what am I going to do with all these people?
Right.
But I also think that I'm really interested in lonely heroines. Like, I'm not interested in heroines who don't have community. I'm interested in heroines who are actively lonely.
Yeah.
Like, who feel out of place.
Right.
And I think I've written them before, but also it feels like Felicity is really sent on her as much as she like makes a mistake and she's, she sets herself up on this journey at the beginning of this book. Felicity is really sent on her journey in the book prior.
Yeah.
When she's delivered essentially to Mal, the hero of that book, like in the third act by the heroine. And she's like, what the fuck? This is not it. And she realizes in that moment, like, oh, this is feeling. Like, these people have feeling. And I've never had feeling.
Yeah.
So, I think it's a really interesting question. Like, I think again, it's a series question because Hattie has a best friend who is like her best person.
Yeah.
And then Grace has like a rich community of women.
Oh yeah. That she's built for herself.
Yeah.
Right?
So again, it's sort of like building. Every book in this series builds on the ones before in a way that I think I had never done quite so overtly.
Right. Well, and I think, like I said, I think some of these things where I basically, like, I didn't appreciate all the things Wicked and the Wallflower was doing.
Yeah, the way
until
it was laying out the threads.
Right, until you kind of see the whole tapestry.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, there's the whole series is laid out for you in Wicked and the Wallflower.
Yeah. But
in the way that the Casino series is laid out for you, and you don't see it until you get to the end.
Right. Right. I mean, I know it's been a while since you've read it, and I mean, I had all my questions, but anything else that, like, I don't know, like, do readers still talk to you about it? Is this a book that lives with you in some sort of way now that it's 5 years later or whatever?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I said, I mean, the biggest piece of this book is that my dad died in the middle of it. And so I remember I wrote the first half and then like I took a break because my dad died. And then I came back to it and I finished it. And I don't really remember writing it. And usually, like, I can tell you stories about, like, I remember while I was writing it that was a thing that really was important.
Yeah.
But there are a couple of scenes, like, I wrote that scene in the alleyway with the cane. And I wrote it before my dad died, and I read it to him in the hospital. And it's the first time that he ever... I'd never read my father anything that I written for. And he was so interested in like mafia, criminal, like stories. Like he loved The Godfather. He loved like all of those stories. And I remember him like being engaged in it in a way that he had never been before. So like this is a really special book for lots of reasons for me. But you know, Felicity is a great heroine. Like for me, she and then this is another sort of personal story, but after he died, I was home. My father died on right after Christmas, and I was home, and my mother had a safe in my childhood bedroom. And the theory was like, and for some reason, like my parents' wills or something were in that safe, and she had lost the key. And I was like, no problem. I have done research on lock picking. I can pick this lock.
Amazing.
And my brother was there and he was like, what? And I was like, don't worry about it. And I was like, I need 2 paper clips. And I literally with 2 paper clips popped the lock on that safe. And I have never felt more powerful ever in my whole life. And my whole family was like, what is happening? It was a real cheap safe. Like
that's a great story.
And so, and Eric was like, well, I guess this begins a whole new chapter. But yeah, so there's, you know, there's that stuff. Like I was really proud of this book in a lot of ways. Like I still remember a lot of the moments, but like that sex scene on the rooftop is
great.
Pretty great. He is really wrecked about it. Like here's his final chance to ruin her. Again, a really classic romance. I think part of it was like this book is full of really classic romance stuff.
Yeah.
Readers love this book. And I think they love this book because they see the bones of so many
like
old romances, right? But like here it is, right? The classic trope of the hero is going to exact revenge on someone else using the heroine. A terrible, terrible thing to do.
Yeah.
And then the moment she's like, yeah, lay me down on this roof and fuck me. He's like, oh shit.
Yeah.
I don't have it in me to ruin you.
Right.
And
it's so good.
What a big dummy. Never felt a feeling. And then once he does,
game over.
Just everything is done.
Yeah, I think that, I mean, and there's so much like we haven't even really talked about.
There's a lot of secondary characters in this book. Like,
well, and I think the other thing that this book does really incredibly well is like the sibling relationships. You know, we've never really talked about this book as being like sibling heavy necessarily, but like, again, and some of that, I think this is the book where Grace leaves, right? Where they say you have to get gone. Yeah, because he's after you, right? And there's all of this, like, you know, Beast knows that Devil is like, something is up, right? And Devil keeps trying to convince him. It's just like, nothing, I'm just doing my job, you know? And I think that's one of the reasons, I know not everyone is a rereader, but to me, the real joy of rereading comes in those types of details that in a romance, obviously, you're like reading for the romance, right? And so some of that stuff, you kind of just are like, okay, yeah, I don't often appreciate that kind of stuff until I'm reading it again. And, you know, the ways that like, it's funny. I mean, like, you know, Beast is out in the garden, like making nightingale sounds, trying to get Devil off of the balcony with Felicity. And she's like, it's an awfully strange nightingale. Finally, is like, he doesn't, you know, I mean, but that's the part I think that this book also, some of my favorite books are rewarding rereads, right? And I think that this is one that really qualifies, right? And there's so many ways in which they're inverses of each other, right? Like sort of, what does it mean to have a good father is a question, right? What does it mean to care for a family? What does it mean to take care of people? And, you know, there's a set of questions that she thought she knew the answers to, right? And all of a sudden,
everything's, I'm very proud of this series. I've said before that like of all my series, this is the series that I wish I could, when it was over, I wished it wasn't.
Yeah.
Usually I'm ready and I wasn't ready for this. Like I could have spent more time there. And maybe often I think, oh, maybe I would go back to it. But like, I really think their story is done.
Yeah.
Like, I think part of the reason why I was sad to leave it is because it felt like
it was closed.
It was these four, right? They're happy.
Yeah.
And happily ever after for this group of siblings. These 3 books, Happily Ever After, includes all the siblings, like having reconciled, like having found peace with their past, having finally understood that, we have to walk different paths, but, none of us are fully villains. Like
Right. Well, and I think it's also like the very one thing, like ultimately, and I kind of thought I should go back and listen to the other 2 and see what we said, but oh well. But I think the thing that's also really beautiful about that is it's very clear from the beginning that their father viewed them as like cannon fodder.
Mm-hmm.
They were never supposed to be together, and he did everything he could to make sure that they saw each other only as rivals.
Mm-hmm.
And so the greatest ending, of course, is to, right?
Yeah.
And that when you open this book, you think there is no way, right?
Yeah.
There's no way that HEA is going to include them as a family.
Yeah.
And yet, right?
And yet, yeah. I mean, I'm very proud of this series.
Yeah.
And it's a series anytime today, a bunch of readers came up to me with these 3 books.
Yeah.
And I'm always really happy to see them all together. There is something very heartwarming about the idea that these 4 have worked it out.
Yeah.
And with Felicity and Hattie too.
Wow. It's my fave.
Yeah. I mean, I think also there's just such a real like cinematic, like these books move fast.
Yeah.
So if you've never tried a historical, and I know some of you haven't, this is a good place to start. I think this is one of the, like, not because it's written by me, but it's a place this is a book I would hand to pretty much anybody and be like, you could read this and learn, like,
you're going to have a good time.
Yeah. This is not going to feel like school.
No, not at all.
So,
well, thank you, Sarah.
Thank you, Jen. I'm Sarah McLean. I'm here with my friend Jen Prokop in a literal hotel room. We are literally together. We are Fated Mates. You can find us every Wednesday at fatedmates.net or wherever you get your podcasting. Our show notes are always lovely and extensive, and today will include some of the things that I've referenced about the book. You can find us on Instagram at Fated Mates Pod, on Threads at Fated Mates Pod, on Blue Sky and Tumblr, and also on Twitter. You can join us on the Patreon. If you really love hearing us talk about romance novels, you can head over there and to patreon.com/fatedmates, where you can join. You get access to a full episode every month, additional of us just like chattering about romance. And also to the Discord, where about 1,000 other people are talking about romance novels all the time. Check us out there. And don't forget, everyone, phone banking is starting up again. We are here, all gas, no breaks, straight through the beginning of November to try and get Democrats elected up and down ticket. Fated Seats begins August 24th. If you head to fatedmates.net/states, you will be able to sign up to get an email from us with all the information of how you can register to phone bank with us. There are a ton of great authors who have donated books who are willing to join us, who are going to join us on phone banking. We're going to do everything we can to save the world. Don't forget, you can stay tuned for a special snippet of Kayla Gross's Silver Foxed. And have a terrific week, everyone. We'll see you next time.
Chapter 1. Alex. You got my set of keys for the lake house, right, honey? My mom asks over my car speaker. Yes, I stopped by your house on the way out of town and got them from your new housekeeper. Oh, yes, her name is Janie. She's lovely, isn't she? I smiled to myself. Yes, Janie is lovely. Truth is, I don't have enough information on Janie to know if she's lovely. But she seemed nice for the 10 seconds I met her when I grabbed the keys to my parents' lake house from her early this morning. But that's something I've always admired about my stepmom. She thinks everyone is lovely. It's part of her charm. While Stephanie Martin tends to be vain and cares more about this season's fashion trends than anything else going on in the world, she doesn't have a mean bone in her body. And most importantly, she loves my dad and me, and she has since the moment she came into my life when I was 5 years old, which is good enough in my book. Honey, I'm so glad you agreed to go to the lake house. It doesn't get used enough, especially considering how busy your dad has been this summer. I gaze out the windshield of my car and admire the landscape of Starlight Haven, California. This place is probably my favorite in the entire world, which is saying a lot since my parents have always loved to travel. I've been all over the world, but Starlight Haven always feels like coming home. The mountains, the clear azure lake, and the dense forests, it makes me feel as if I'm living in some fantasy world. I'm glad too. I've missed coming here. I can hear Mom smile through the phone, probably thinking of all the times we spent together up here while I was growing up. Hiking, biking, hanging out at the beach. It was an amazing part of my childhood. Are you almost there? I know you left early this morning. It's such a long drive for only a weekend. I put my blinker on and turn into the long tree-lined driveway that leads to the house. Yep, pulling in now. Oh, good, good. Are you sure you don't want to stay longer? I can hear in the tone of her voice that she actually wants to say, Are you sure you don't want to stay longer? It's not like you have anything going on in your life besides work, honey. But she would never say that to me. She's too nice. Not to mention, she thinks I'll start crying. Joke's on her, though, because at this point, I'm all cried out. No more tears are left inside my body. Of that, I'm sure. In fact, this weekend, I have decided I'm not allowed to cry. Only rest and relaxation for me. With maybe a little bit of self-reflection. Why? Because as soon as I get back from my weekend getaway, I'm entering my hot girl, badass bitch era. Unfortunately, I can't stay longer. Allie will kill me if I miss any of my 30th birthday week. She wants to meet up every day and celebrate. She's decided it's a whole week affair. Oh, yes, I remember you telling me about that. You should have had Allie come up to the house. There's plenty of room. As the massive lake house nestled amongst pine trees comes into view, I hold back a laugh at how much of an understatement that is. My dad owns a global creative media agency, Spark Life Creative, one of the best and biggest in the world. And while Dad has kept himself relatively humble, he loves to splurge on real estate. This lake house, or should I say lake mansion, is one of his most prized possessions that he claims he had to fight another man over. Especially since, at the time, it was a newly renovated mid-century modern home that used to be the summer getaway of popular singers from the 50s and 60s. This house is gorgeous, to say the least, and my parents have always taken good care of it. Thanks, Mom, but I'll be fine. I wanted some alone time this weekend. All right, you know I worry. I'd never be able to be in that big house all by myself. I clench my jaw. Why would you say that? Now I'm going to be paranoid. Sorry. Just be sure to turn on the security system. That doesn't help. I chuckle. I shouldn't have said anything. You know it's safe up there, so don't be scared. She pauses. Oh, don't forget the stores there close early. Did you bring food? I look in my rearview mirror at all the grocery bags. I love to cook, and part of my self-care mission this weekend includes making all of my favorite dishes. It's a bummer they'll only be for one, but I try not to think too much about how freaking single I am. And the fact that, at this moment, I shouldn't be single. Honey, are you still there? Yeah, sorry. I stopped at the store on the way in, so I don't have to leave if I don't want to. Good. Let me know if you need anything else, okay? Your dad and I are going to a charity event this weekend, but we'll be around. I will, I say as I pull up to the garage. I use the clicker Janie gave me this morning, and the door opens. If I don't talk to you, I'll see you later this week at my birthday dinner. Sounds good, honey. Love you. Love you too. The phone call ends, and I turn off the ignition before staring at my green eyes in the rearview mirror. I have my long red hair pulled up into a high ponytail and no makeup on so I can see the patterns of freckles across my face. With all the time I plan on spending at the lake and pool this weekend, I'll not only go through a gallon of sunscreen, but I'll probably leave with twice the freckles. Something my ex-fiancé would have commented on. He claimed he liked my freckles, but always made it seem otherwise. For my birthday last year, he bought me the ugliest straw sun hat to wear with a massive brim, claiming it was fashionable and would keep the sun off my face when we went for walks or out together during the day. Fashionable my ass. I shake my head to clear my thoughts of him. Nope. We're not going to think about stupid Sean! I yell out loud, my cheeks turning strawberry red from the force of my voice. You're leaving here a badass bitch, Alexandra Martin. An even hotter, ready to have some fun, badass bitch. With my mantra now playing in my head, I get out of the car, ready to start my self-care weekend.
Chapter 2. Elijah. I've never been one for the outdoors. Yet I find myself parked outside a lake house of all places, in a town called Starlight Haven. It's, quaint. Okay, it's more than quaint. The town I drove through to get here is, but this house is ostentatious, to say the least. I don't even have to go in to know the inside is decorated to perfection. Though I would expect nothing less from Oliver's wife. Ping. I slip my aviators over the neck of my t-shirt and unbuckle my seatbelt, pulling my phone from the charger to find one new text waiting for me. Oliver. You make it there all right? Elijah. I'm arriving now. Enjoy your weekend. Remember to relax. I don't want to hear from you or see you online at all. No work, or I'll fire you. The corner of my mouth turns up in a grin as I type out a response. You'd never fire me. Then I'll give you all our problem clients. I hear Deb is looking for a consult. I bristle when I see the name of my ex-wife on the screen. You wouldn't. I would. Like I said, I'd better not see you online. Don't even look at your email. Nothing. Take one weekend off. You deserve it. I'm going to HR with this text chain. I'll say it wasn't me. They'll believe me, because nobody thinks an old man like me can text. You just outed yourself. There's a long pause before his text comes through. Elijah Astor? Take the damn weekend off. I'll talk to you on Monday. I grumble a curse under my breath before I type out fine in all capital letters, like a petulant child. While I know Oliver is messing with me, I wouldn't put it past him to make me suffer a consult with my ex if I don't follow his instructions. He's a good friend and boss, but for a 55-year-old man, he sure is meddling. With my phone now off, I reach for my brown leather messenger bag I had placed on the floor near the passenger seat and slip my phone inside. Did I go against Oliver's blabbering and bring my computer? Yes, but not for the reason he would think. If I'm going to take a weekend away from work, I may as well spend it doing something I love. Writing. And not copywriting for work, but creative writing. Something I haven't been able to do in a long while, considering how busy I've been. Ever since Oliver made me vice president of client relations last year at Spark Life Creative, I feel as if I haven't been able to breathe. While the money is nice and I enjoy the travel, I'm tired. I know it's not Oliver's fault, and his convincing me to come to his lake house for the weekend was his attempt to get me to maintain a work-life balance. But I haven't wanted one. Since my divorce from Deb, I purposely took more work than I should and offered to travel globally when needed. Not only does it soothe the part of me that is a complete control freak, but most importantly, it takes my mind off the loneliness I feel. How, at 45 years old, I have everything people dream of. A secure, well-paying job, good friends, a full bank account, and a robust retirement fund. But nothing I would truly call achievements. I thought by now that I'd have a family, maybe have started my own business or published a few novels. that I would have something to leave behind when I die, something to be proud of. But if I were to keel over right now, my tombstone would read, Elijah Michael Astor. He was a nice guy with a good job. People liked him. As my father would say, if he was still alive. How pathetic, son. With that lovely thought in mind, I get out of my sports car and stretch my tall body, my knees popping and back cracking as I do. I probably should have rented a better vehicle for the long drive and mountain terrain up here. But summer is winding down, so I decided against it. I opted instead to drive the 7 hours from Los Angeles with the top down and the wind in my hair, enjoying the weather. I'll never admit it to Oliver, but it was nice to finally use my car for what I initially bought it for, joyrides. Though my friends all like to joke it was a midlife crisis purchase. Maybe they're right, since I bought it last year after my divorce. With a sigh, I open the small trunk and grab my travel bag, slinging it over my shoulder while holding my messenger bag in my other hand. Then I study the front of the house. It's massive. Oliver wasn't kidding when he said I would love this place. While I would never buy a mansion, I can appreciate the mid-century architecture. It's sexy, sleek, and unique. Feeling a little more excited about the idea of hanging out alone in an expensive home where I can write and enjoy the quiet out of the city, I walk up the stone drive and look at my watch. It's just after 6 p.m, which means there's still a couple of hours of daylight left. Oliver said there's a hot tub in the backyard that overlooks the lake and private beach. He also said the sunsets are unreal. And while I don't like the outdoors, I do enjoy hot tubs and nice patios with a good view, especially if a glass of wine is involved. My stomach growls, and I am reminded I haven't eaten since breakfast, a matter I should take care of before I drink wine and end up getting drunk alone. However, at this point, that sounds like it could be a good idea. I need to do something different to get myself out of the monotonous routine I'm in. With my evening now officially determined, I fish out the key Oliver gave me and insert it into the lock of the massive multi-paneled mahogany door that probably costs more than my mortgage. When the interior is revealed to me, I let out a low whistle. This place is beautiful. That doesn't seem like the right word, but it's the only one I've got right now. Once I've closed the door and locked it behind me, I set my bags down and look around, taking in the whole space. The floor plan is open, seamlessly connecting the different living areas. There are large floor-to-ceiling windows and glass doors that allow natural light to flood the spaces, which are decorated with sleek furniture and minimal art. While I haven't seen the house in its entirety, from what I can see, the space feels homey and inviting. More excitement fills me at the prospect of spending time exploring this place like a museum, studying all the clean lines and geometric shapes. I know Oliver's wife likes art too, so I bet there are some beautiful and rare pieces in here. I rub the back of my neck, chuckling to myself at how giddy I just got. But I can't help it. I enjoy the simplicity and functionality of things. I'm also a sucker for homes that are made of sustainable materials. It's one of the personality traits that Deb never appreciated nor cared for in the 10 years we were married. I let out a grunt. Why did Oliver have to bring up my ex? He wants me to be relaxed this weekend, but now I'm irritated thinking of her and our excruciatingly long, drawn-out divorce that was made final this past year. A milestone I haven't had time to fully celebrate yet. Maybe I'll toast to that while I'm in the hot tub tonight. Thump. The soft and sudden noise has the hair rising on the back of my neck. I stay still and try to attune my hearing toward the origin of the noise. For a moment, I think I imagined it. Or maybe something in the home was settling. But then I hear another noise, almost like a clanging, followed by another soft thumping noise. If I was rational, I would get out of the house and call the police to come investigate. But this is a small town, so I doubt the cops would get here quickly. It's more likely that an item fell over or an animal got in, especially in a big house surrounded by forests and mountains. And there's a part of me, the overly confident part, that says I can handle myself against an intruder. I'm tall, lean, and work out every day to stay fit and active, especially as I get older. I trust that if I needed to, I could defend myself. When I hear another clanging sound, I pick up my pace, looking around for anything I can grab in case I need to take action. This is when minimalism doesn't help anything. It would be nice if Oliver collected baseball bats or swords. With a quiet exhale, I clench my fists at my sides, turning a corner to be met with an expansive dining room. I look straight ahead, and I stand there awkwardly when my brain takes in what I see beyond it. The open floor plan does nothing to hide the state-of-the-art kitchen with a panoramic view of the lake beyond. But that's not the view that stops me in my tracks. No, that's not it at all. It's the naked back and ample round ass of a ginger-haired woman. She's standing at the sink washing a pan in a tiny white thong. Her hair is tied in a high ponytail, the soft waves of it landing between her pale, freckled shoulder blades. As I allow my eyes to study her further, I see there's a red string tied around her generous waist, which I assume is an apron. Fuck me. My mouth goes dry, and my cock stirs beneath the placket of my dark-washed jeans as time freezes and my brain stops working altogether. When she starts humming a tune I don't recognize, it's as if my trance deepens, and I can't help but admire the rest of her. My eyes make their way down and up the curves and lines of her bare, full-figured thighs, before settling on her flared hips. I swallow, my tongue like sandpaper against the roof of my mouth. I should be a decent man and make myself known. I should let whoever this insanely sexy woman is know that she's not alone in the house. As I debate my options for the best way to handle this, I pray that she doesn't turn around, because if she does, I have a feeling this will not end well for me. Unless Oliver hired her? No. I shake my head. He wouldn't do that. If he did, he'd at least warn me. He's the type of friend who tells you too much information, not less. Maybe if I cover my eyes and clear my throat, she won't be as afraid. Or I suppose I could just turn around and walk back the way I came, and she'll be none the wiser that I was even here, ogling her like a pervert. Yes, that's what I should do. I should walk away. With my decision made and my gentleman brain coming back online, I start to turn on my heel. That's when I'm met with a blood-curdling scream.
Chapter 3. Alex. There's a man in my house. There's a fucking man in my house. From what it looks like, a very sexy man. But a man that I do not know is in my house. Okay, my parents' house, but sort of my house. Oh my God, I'm freaking out. I am freaking out. I scream again as I press my bare ass against the cool sink, using my arms to wrangle my boobs that are falling out of the sides of the too small apron. At least I was smart enough to put it on in the first place. Not that I thought a man would show up to find me mostly naked, but I didn't want to get oil burns. Why the hell am I thinking about oil burns? A stranger is in my house. I open my mouth to scream again, but he holds up a hand. Please don't scream, his warm voice pleads. I swear I'm not going to hurt you. My eyes dart from his large palm to his salt and pepper beard and perfectly styled silver hair. Then I do the thing he asked me not to do. I scream, then grab the first thing I see, a wooden spoon. I hold it up and stare at the stunned man in the dining room, glad there's at least some space between us. Who the fuck are you? I yell, my question a high-pitched screech. His stunning blue irises that remind me of the lake stare into me, unblinking. I shake the wooden spoon at him and try to ignore the way his penetrating gaze sends a zing straight to my lady parts. Hello? I asked you a question. Who are you? His attention travels from my face to the wooden spoon, the corners of his lips tilting up slightly before he looks back at me. He shifts on his feet, and I wave the spoon at him. Don't come any closer. Answer me. Who are you? He holds up both his hands and doesn't move, his eyes still trained on mine. At least he's keeping his gaze on my face instead of my almost naked form. My name is Elijah. I'm friends with Oliver Martin, the owner of this house. My dad has friends? I mean, of course he has friends. And I guess this attractive silver fox is his friend. But I've never heard him talk about an Elijah. I repeat his name again and again in my mind, but I don't know any Elijahs. How do you know him? I ask, confused. I'm the Vice President of Client Relations at Spark Life Creative. Elijah, Vice President of Client Relations. I repeat it again and again until it finally clicks. You're Aster? The man nods, his perfectly angled jaw flexing, along with the well-developed lean muscles in his arms that he has clenched at his sides. Elijah Aster, he confirms. Oliver likes to call me by my last name, but we're close friends. He gave me access to this house for the weekend. I swear I'm not going to hurt you. My body still tense, I gently lower the spoon and place it on the counter, crossing both my arms over my chest to give it more coverage. My mom said it was going to be empty this weekend. I watch Elijah's brow pinch as he processes my words and drops his head back to look at the ceiling. His mouth moves silently as if he's praying, or maybe he's cursing. When he drops his head down to his chest, I hear him ask, Are you Oliver's daughter, Alexandra? Yes, I'm Alex. This time I do hear him curse. For a moment he doesn't say anything. I watch his chest move up and down in heavy breaths, the muscles of his biceps ticking beneath the fabric of his fitted gray t-shirt. Elijah? I ask when the silence becomes too much. I'm sorry, I should go. This is highly inappropriate, he says, his tone tight and eyes on the ground. A smile tugs at my lips. This is highly inappropriate. I want to mimic back in a British accent, but I don't. I find it amusing that he sounds so proper for a man who looks like he does. Someone who'd take you over his knee and call you a bad girl. Not a man who averts his gaze and apologizes for doing nothing wrong. He turns to leave, taking a few steps forward with his hands still clenched at his sides. I don't know why, but I find myself going after him. Wait, I call. As if he forgets the reason he turned to leave in the first place, he spins on his heel to face me. But as soon as he sees my apron-clad form, he spins back around. Sorry, he apologizes again. It's fine. Let me go put something on. Don't leave. Before he can say anything, I rush out of the kitchen and up the stairs to the master bedroom. Breathing harder from my efforts, I untie the apron and lay it on the California King before grabbing the first thing I see in my suitcase. I pop the emerald sundress over my head and tug it down. It's a skimpy thing with thin fabric and a short hemline that I'd normally wear over a bathing suit, but it will have to do for now. I'm in a rush to get back downstairs. Why? I don't exactly know, but I don't want to keep Elijah waiting. I have a feeling if I left him down there long enough, he'd leave without a word. I want to at least talk to him about what happened so he doesn't tell my dad about this. It would be awkward as hell. Once I've slid on a pair of underwear with more coverage, I'm running down the stairs. When I don't see Elijah in the dining room, I panic. I hear the jingling of keys and rush to the front door, completely out of breath now. When his tall form comes into view, a nice duffel bag over his shoulder and a leather messenger bag in his hand, I frown. I told you not to leave. He tenses at my voice and turns, his sapphire gaze looking me up and down. It's hard to tell if he likes what he sees because his bowed pink lips are pursed and his forehead is still pinched. Not that it should matter. I shouldn't want this man to like what he sees, right? This is your family home and I'm intruding, he says. I'll go find a hotel for the night and head back to LA in the morning. When he grasps the doorknob, I jump into action, placing my hand over his. My fingers touch the skin of his knuckles, and static electricity zips up my hand. We both gasp. I pull away and shake it out. Are you okay? He asks quietly, those damn blue eyes boring into mine as if he's genuinely concerned that I'm hurt. I shoot him a small smile. Dry mountain air. He nods, standing to his full height in front of me. My head hits the upper part of his chest, and my skin prickles from how close we're standing. I tuck a loose strand of hair behind my ear and take a breath in an attempt to calm my fast-beating heart. It doesn't help that Elijah is a very attractive man. From far away, I could see he was good-looking, but up close? Holy wow! With a jaw that could cut glass, high cheekbones, a well-manicured beard, and not a single hair out of place, this man could be a model. And now that I can see his face more clearly, I'm going to guess he's not as old as I initially thought. Probably quite a few years younger than my dad, which excites me more than it probably should. Elijah swallows, his Adam's apple bobbing in his stubbled throat as his gaze darts to the V of my dress. I have large boobs, so anything I wear that has a lower neckline will show cleavage. But the longer he looks, I realize that, in my rush, I forgot to put on a bra. My nipples go hard under his attention, and I cross my arms over my chest. Elijah clears his throat and glances down at his watch. He's flustered to the point that I can see a tinge of pink on the apples of his cheeks. "I should leave before it gets dark," he says. I reach out and take his bicep in my hand. The skin is warm under my touch, and I swear he shivers. "Sorry," I say, pulling my hand back and giving him space. "Just stop trying to leave." I laugh lightly. "I don't understand how my parents double-booked us here, but you're here already, and you're my dad's friend. You can't stay at a hotel." "It's fine. It will be one night." "The hotels are probably booked," I counter. "It's their busiest time of year. I doubt you'll be able to find one. Just stay here for the night. It's totally fine."
I should at least try to call and see.
I press my lips together, wondering if I should be offended that he's so determined to leave. Though my rational brain understands why he wants to. "If you feel like you need to go ahead. Though it's really not a problem for you to stay here. I bet if you text my dad, he'd insist you stay too. He wouldn't want you to waste your money when we have plenty of perfectly good rooms here." Elijah looks at his bags and then back at me.
Are you sure? I don't want to make you uncomfortable.
"I promise you're not. But if it makes you more comfortable, you can sleep in the theater room downstairs. That's as far as you could possibly get from me in the master bedroom." His eyes soften.
"Please, don't take my wanting to leave the wrong way. This is..."
He makes a small gesture between us.
"Complicated and awkward."
I twirl a piece of my wavy hair around my finger. It doesn't escape me that Elijah watches the movement with interest. As if my body has a mind of its own, I pop my chest out a bit so his attention wavers back to my cleavage before he quickly looks into my eyes. Could this man really be attracted to me? I paint a warm smile on my face and cock my hip, placing a hand on it. This doesn't have to be complicated or awkward. Stay the night, and if in the morning you still want to leave, feel free. Elijah swallows again, and I'll admit I love the way his stubbled throat flexes and the veins in his neck pop as he does it. "Wow, Alex," I internally scold myself. Maybe I should drive 30 minutes across the Nevada border and go to a club. Apparently, I'm horny and need some attention. If I didn't, I wouldn't be actively eye-fucking my dad's friend/employee. But I mean, who can blame me? This man is gorgeous. Finally, after what seems like forever, he stops the war he's having with himself and nods.
"If you're really okay with it, I'll stay for the night."
"Oh, great!" I clap my hands and do a silly little excited jump. Elijah's eyes go straight to my boobs at the motion, and I bite my lip to keep from smiling. I know I shouldn't, but I like that he's looking. I like that it seems our attraction to each other is mutual, even if it's a little naughty given who we are.
"Thank you for offering," he says. "But please let me know if at any time you want me to leave."
I let out a breathy laugh. That won't be happening. As you said, it's only for the night. And really, Elijah, no thanks needed. Though I wouldn't suggest sleeping in the theater room, especially when we have perfectly good beds. He chuckles, and I'm relieved to hear the sound.
"A guest room sounds wonderful."
Then follow me. I'll show you where they are. I grin at him, moving toward the staircase that leads upstairs. He smiles back as he shifts his bag over his shoulder. Then he falls in step behind me.
Chapter 4. Elijah. What in the hell am I doing? What in the actual hell? That's all that is running through my mind as I walk behind my best friend's, my boss's daughter, and staring at her ass, no less. The very plump ass I saw framed by a thong and gawked at for far too long. The perfectly round-shaped ass I will now dream about. Jesus, I'm going to hell. If Oliver knew about this, he'd kill me. Do you like darker colors or brighter ones? Alex asks, the dulcet tone of her voice going straight to my groin. I clear my throat in an attempt to get a grip on myself. A mix of both. She looks over her shoulder at me with those big green doe eyes of hers. My God, she's beautiful. And far too young. And off limits, Oliver's voice says in my head. I thought you were going to say darker. Why is that? I ask, genuinely curious. She slows her step a bit, so we're almost side by side as we walk down a long hallway on the top level of the house. I know we just met, but you're so serious. She giggles a bit. The sound is so sweet and melodic. It doesn't help the semi I've been trying to control since I saw her almost naked freckled body in the kitchen. It also doesn't help that her choice of dress leaves little to the imagination. When we were downstairs, it took everything in me not to reach my finger out and trace the perfect circle of her nipples through the thin emerald cotton. I clear my throat again. I'm not that serious. Really? She quirks a light red eyebrow at me as she stops in front of a bedroom. I can be very unserious if I want to be. The words I'm saying are true, though her assumption is right. I am normally a serious person, but given the right environment and people, I let myself relax. Lately, though, that side has been harder to bring out. Another reason Oliver told me to take a break. Alex hums, but doesn't say anything. I want to ask her what she's thinking, but she gestures for me to walk through the open door. Ladies first, I tell her. She smiles, her round, freckled cheeks naturally pink. So formal. I open my mouth to answer that it's called being a gentleman, but she walks through the door and into the bedroom. She twirls around in a circle with her hands out, the motion flaring the hemline of that too-short dress so that I see the tops of thick thighs. Do you like it? She asks, her hands still out, gesturing to the room. I want to say, yes, I like it. I like it too much. But I wouldn't be talking about the bedroom. My jaw clenched. I set my bags down and look around the room. The decor is typical of a mid-century modern home. The king-size bed is low to the ground and covered in a thin taupe comforter with a gray blanket folded lengthwise at the bottom to accent it. There's also a matching gray bench seat that appears to flip up for storage at the base of the bed, and an abstract painting hanging over the walnut headboard. It's nice, I say, honestly. It's a great mix of light and dark. Her smile beams, and I realize in that moment that even if I hated this room, I would say I loved it, just to see her smile like that for me. Oh, good. The bathroom is through there. She points behind me, and that is the walk-in closet. She points next to the bathroom. If you need help with the shower at any point, let me know. I haven't been here in a while, but I think I remember how to operate all the fancy buttons. Lewd images of me taking her wet nude form from behind, that perfectly curved ass of hers slapping back into my pelvis repeatedly, flashes behind my eyelids so quickly, I feel as if I've been hit by a freight train. I press my eyes shut, and when I open them again, Alex looks concerned. Are you okay? You're flushed. I manage a tight smile. It was a long drive up here. That fact is true. I am tired and hungry from the drive, though that's not why I look peaky. Thank God she can't read my mind, or she would have called the cops on me by now. Hell, I should call the cops on myself. Oh, I'm so sorry. She smacks her forehead, and I have the desire to grab her hand and kiss the skin she just hit. I dig my fingers into my thigh. I've lost my goddamn mind. Maybe I should have seen a psychiatrist instead of taking a vacation. What are you sorry for? I ask, my voice, by some miracle, sounding normal. I'm a terrible host. I should have at least offered you something to drink. I think of how we met and picture her serving me a glass of water in that apron. I clear my throat and shift on my feet. You weren't supposed to host me. No apologies needed. So my dad offered the house to you for the weekend? She asks, sitting down on the bench seat. I try not to cringe when she calls Oliver Dad. It sobers me a bit to hear her say that, reminding me she's off limits and my thoughts are still highly inappropriate. Yes, it was very last minute, I say, sticking my hands in my pockets. She hums, tucking a loose tendril of hair that looks like silk behind her ear. So typical that my dad wouldn't ask my mom before offering the place to you. She thought it was going to be empty this weekend. We didn't have any rentals on the schedule. Like I said, I'll stay the night, then leave tomorrow. Then you can continue on as if I was never here. Her light laughter fills the air. You made a memorable entrance, Elisha. I don't think I'll be able to forget your visit, no matter how short. With that, she pops up off the bench and takes a step toward me as I try not to let the images of her naked ass and that white thong pop into my mind yet again. I bought a ton of groceries. If you'd like to get settled, then come down to the kitchen. I'm making chicken cacciatore for dinner. I was also planning on breaking into my dad's wine cellar. After all this, I could use a drink. That's kind of you. My mouth is already watering at the idea of a home-cooked meal. When was the last time I had one? I can't remember. She smiles. It's no trouble. You came here to get away like I did. Or at least, I'm assuming you did. If you insist on leaving so soon, you might as well get a night of relaxation in before your long drive tomorrow. All right, I say, knowing it's probably a bad idea to be anywhere near her. But I do need to eat. Great, she says excitedly. I'll see you downstairs. Alex spins and walks toward the door, the late sunlight from the window streaming in to catch strands of golden brown mixed in with the orange and red hairs of her ponytail. In her swift departure, I'm left with a lingering scent of rose that tickles my nose and goes straight to my groin. I adjust myself and walk to the door, closing and locking it before I rest my head on the cool wood. I shouldn't have said yes to dinner and just starved for the night. But I couldn't help myself. She's so damn beautiful, and apparently, I'm a glutton for punishment. After another inhale and exhale, I walk to the bench seat, sitting in the exact spot Alex just was. I reach for my phone and turn it on. As it powers up, I debate if I should text Oliver, let him know what happened, minus walking in on his daughter mostly naked. But instead, I find myself opening a search browser on the internet. While I knew Oliver had a daughter, I surprisingly don't know much about her. I think the last thing I remember him saying was that she was always so busy with one thing or another that he and his wife hardly ever saw her. Curious to know her, especially after our meeting, I type Alexandra Martin in the search bar and press enter. Immediately, several results appear for her. I know it's the same person because her picture pops up beside the name. I click the first link, a networking website, and discover she's a first-grade teacher at a private school in Los Angeles. That explains why I've never seen her around the office then. Not only does she not work for Oliver, but I know teaching is exhausting, especially elementary school. Or at least, that's what I've heard from friends of mine who work in education. Images of her teaching play behind my eyelids, and I smile. Even though we've just met, her personality is warm and open. I bet she's a wonderful teacher. Going back to the search, I scan the page for my next click. When I see one for a local newspaper in Los Angeles, I stop and click as soon as I see the headline. Alexandra Martin engaged to business mogul Sean Jameson Jr. My stomach bottoms out. Alex is engaged? I could have sworn she was flirting with me before. But maybe she was just being nice and I'm simply reading into things because I've been lonely. And because I'm attracted to her. I furrow my brow as I try to remember if she was wearing a ring. But I don't remember seeing one. Come to think of it, neither Oliver nor Stephanie ever mentioned Alex getting engaged or that she was dating anyone. My curiosity grows as to why my friend would leave something that large out of our conversations. I study the black and white picture of the couple and wonder if it's because Sean Jameson Jr. looks like a total smarmy asshole with his perfectly coiffed brown hair and clean-shaven jaw. The article is over a year old now, And I highly doubt they ever got married, because if my best friend left me off his daughter's wedding invite list, I'd wonder if we were really friends at all, which I know isn't the case. I also doubt she'd be on a weekend getaway by herself to a remote home her parents own, cooking mostly naked, if there was a man in her life. And if there is, that man needs to get his head examined, because I would never let a woman like her out of my sight. My cock twitches in agreement, and I release a long sigh before I stand from the bench and turn off my phone again. After I drop it on the dresser, I open my travel bag to grab a fresh pair of clothes. I think a quick shower is in order, because there's no way I'm going to make it through dinner without doing something I'll regret, like asking Alex to sleep with me, or coming in my pants, both of which would be mortifying, both of which I cannot allow myself to do. Hopefully my fist can take the edge off, and I'll be able to have a nice, normal dinner with her. Yes, that's what I will do. I'll ask her questions about her life instead of stalking her like a creep online. I'll get to know her better, make small talk, and then I'll leave in the morning. No harm done. I'll let my attraction be only that, an attraction.
Chapter 5. Alex. I'm pouring 2 glasses of red wine as a freshly showered Elijah walks into the kitchen. He's barefoot now in dark wash jeans, wearing a similar colored denim button-up with the sleeves folded below his elbow and the top few buttons left open. My eyes go straight to the smattering of dark chest hair peeking out, and I have to stop my mouth from falling open. Holy Mother of God. Elijah smiles as he approaches me, completely unaware that he's set my panties on fire. Scratch that. He's melted them. It smells wonderful in here, he says, looking over my shoulder at the food I have simmering on the stove. Thanks, I say, sliding a glass of wine toward him. I hope you like Chianti. It's from 2016. He lets out a low whistle. You sure you want to share this with me? Isn't there some rule that you have to share expensive wine with someone? Not at all. I smile coyly. Fine. But at the end of the day, who really wants to drink alone, right? Elijah's serious blue eyes stare into me as if I've said something that struck him deeply. Right, he says after a moment. I'm wondering if he drinks alone often. By his reaction to my words, it would seem that he does. And that makes me sad. Because while Sean and I parted ways over 6 months ago now, I am not alone. I have my best friend, Allie, our group of girlfriends, and my family. Now I want to know who Elijah has or doesn't have. I don't see a wedding ring on his finger, and I can only guess he doesn't have a girlfriend because he came here alone, like me. I hold up my wine glass, deciding this man needs to have a little fun. Even if he only stays one night, I can give him a night of company, even if it's platonic. Because, let's be honest, if he is interested in me like I think he is, I doubt it will go any further than harmless flirting. Which is sad. I bet Elijah is wonderful in bed. He gives off that big dick energy without even trying. And he seems like a sweet guy. Cheers, I say as Elijah holds up his glass. To an evening of not drinking alone and good company. The light tone in my voice has the corners of his mouth tugging up. He repeats my words back to me before he clinks his glass against mine. We bring our drinks to our lips, and our eyes stay connected while we sip the savory liquid. His gaze is strong and steadfast as he swallows, and I feel like the moment happening between us right now is erotic. I swallow my wine and then avert my gaze, knowing that if he keeps staring at me like that, I can't be held liable for my actions. Setting my wine glass down on the island, I feel his eyes follow me as I go to check the dinner. I grab a pot holder and lift the lid on the cast iron skillet, the hot steam wafting up. Elijah is right. It does smell amazing. Happiness fills me as I admire the rich and rustic dish I've created. The chicken is falling off the bone, which means it's ready. Do you need help with anything? Elijah's velvety timbre asks, making the hairs on the back of my neck rise. I pick up the wooden spoon and turn around to face him. Nope, it's ready. Elijah's eyes track from my face to the wooden spoon I'm holding. When his attention settles on me once more, he's blushing again. I know he's thinking about earlier. A playful smirk forms on my lips. I shouldn't like that my dad's friend is clearly thinking about me naked, but I can't help it. I do. It feels nice to be desired, even if nothing comes of it. You know, a wooden spoon could have been a great weapon, I tease. A burst of laughter shoots forth from Elijah, and something inside me changes at the sound. It's wonderful. I want to hear him laugh again. "What would you do with it?" he asks. I hold the spoon in my one hand, then tap my chin. I suppose hitting you with it wouldn't do much, but I think if I had chucked it at your head hard enough, I could have potentially poked an eye out, or at least stunned you enough to get a head start. He laughs again, and the tingling warmth I feel in my belly spreads throughout my entire body. "Maybe next time reach for something sharper." "Are you suggesting you'd rather I'd come at you with a knife?" His blue eyes turn serious. "I want you to be safe." A lump forms in my throat. Who is this man, and where the hell did he come from? We don't know each other, but I 100% believe that he would have accepted me coming at him with a knife had it been in self-defense. Maybe it's because I'm his friend's daughter, but I get an odd feeling it's more than that. "Good thing I'm safe with you then," I say honestly. His self-assured gaze falters for a split second, but then he smiles gently. "Good thing." Chills zip up my spine and my toes curl against the hardwood floor. I decide it's time to eat. Otherwise, we'll stand here all night saying weird things to each other while I try to figure out if he's into me or if he just wants to take care of me because he knows my dad. "Will you take our wine to the dining table?" I ask. "I'll plate everything up and bring it over." "Of course." He picks up the broad-based glasses dutifully as I turn my focus to the chicken cacciatore. After I have everything plated how I like, I walk it slowly over to the way too beautiful man sitting at the table. He watches my every move as I set the food down in front of him. I try to ignore how it feels, how every part of me tingles with his focus on me like that. But it's hard to do. So once the food is out of my hands, I head to the kitchen to grab a salad from the fridge I'd made earlier and take a deep breath. When I arrive back at the table, Elijah is eyeing his dinner plate like it's the eighth wonder of the world. "Go ahead, eat," I tell him as I take the seat at the head of the table with him to my right. I smooth out my purple-colored skirt of the sundress I put on and place my napkin over my lap. Elijah looks up from his plate, and in place of his intense gaze is pure excitement. "This looks beautiful." "It's nothing," I say, reaching for my fork. As I pick it up, his hand covers mine. "It's not nothing," Elijah says. I stare at his warm hand over mine, the veins prominent as he squeezes. Without thinking of it, I flip my hand over and our palms meet. To my surprise, he takes the offering and holds my hand with steady pressure as I look at his handsome face. His smile is sincere and gentle as he says, "Really, Alex, I can't remember the last time someone cooked for me. Thank you." Then he pulls back his hand, and I'm left staring at my now burning palm, feeling as if he marked me somehow with that simple touch and his gratitude. "You're welcome," I reply quietly, trying to get it together. I grab my wine and take a sip, hoping the alcohol can knock some sense into me. There is no reason for me to be so attracted to Elijah. He's my dad's friend, for one. He also works with him. And there's the little fact that he's older than me. Though that doesn't really matter. I've always said that if people are consenting adults, they can do what they want. But I know my dad would take issue with it. I dated a man in his mid-50s once, when I was 25. Dad hated it, and I get why from his perspective since the man was close to his age. But that relationship was stable and fun. We didn't work out in the end because we had different plans for our lives. He already had children and didn't want more. I, on the other hand, knew I wanted babies. That desire has only grown as the years have gone on. Sean's face enters my mind for a split second, and I take another sip of wine. Nope, we're not thinking about him, or any of my exes for that matter. Not when I have a man who I think is single in front of me, because I for sure have already double-checked for a ring, and there isn't one. I give my full attention back to Elijah as he brings a fork full of food to his mouth, his eyelids closing as his lips wrap around the metal of the fork. I don't miss the small smile that tugs at the corners of his mouth as he chews. When a gentle moan reaches my ears, the tips of them turn pink, and I swear a bolt of electricity hits my clit. "You like it?" I ask, my voice breathier than I expected it to be. He savors the flavor of it for another moment before opening his eyes. "Like" is an understatement. It's the best thing I've ever tasted. I think I go into a full-body blush, something I can't hide because of my fair skin, a trait I've been told I inherited from my mom's side of the family. That can't be true. If you're friends with my dad, you've been to the best restaurants in the city, maybe even the world. At the mention of my dad, Elijah seems to tense a bit, and I make a mental note to mention him as little as possible, especially since I want to explore this buzzing attraction between us. Oliver does have expensive taste, but I prefer meals that are made with love. And this, he says with conviction, pointing his fork at his plate, has been made with love. Yep, I've definitely turned the color of the tomato sauce. That's really nice of you, I exhale, trying to calm my blush. I've been so busy I haven't had the chance to cook recently, but I do love it, especially when I can cook for other people. I take a bite of my own food and let out a little groan myself as the rich sauce hits my taste buds. Elijah clears his throat and shifts in his chair. "What have you been busy with?" he asks, sounding genuine. "If you don't mind sharing." I shake my head and swallow. "No, not at all." I take another sip of my wine as I think of how to answer this question. I was engaged until about 6 months ago. We broke it off, which created a lot of chaos. "How so?" I grab the open bottle of Chianti Elijah brought to the table and refresh my glass. His is still mostly full, so I set the bottle down and then take another long drink. "You don't have to say if it upsets you, Alex." I express appreciation for his thoughtfulness with a soft, grateful smile. It doesn't upset me. Elijah brings his attention to the wine in my hand, and I huff a light laugh. "It's more annoying than anything, really," I continue. "Sean and I weren't compatible in the end, so we broke it off. And while we hadn't started doing much wedding planning, the breakup caused a ripple effect in our social circles." I put my wine down. "But that's boring and stupid. The bigger issue was that we lived together, so I had to move. Do you know how hard it is to find a place that isn't infested with roaches at a reasonable price in Los Angeles?" Elijah swallows his bite of food, his brow pinching like I've noticed it does when he's thinking. Even when he's not doing it, I can see the fine lines on his forehead from his years of scrunching. I want to reach out and smooth the skin with my thumb. Thankfully, I have some self-restraint. "I have to say I haven't had to look for a place in a long time, but I've heard the market is bad," he says. I live on a teacher's salary, so finding a place in my budget near my school isn't easy either. Again, Elijah's brow pinches. He opens his mouth as if he wants to say something, but then closes it again. "What is it?" I ask. He sets his fork down and wipes his mouth. His blue gaze penetrates mine again. "Forgive me if this is rude, but I would think Oliver would be glad to help you." I grin. The question doesn't offend me. I've grown up with privilege and get asked questions like this all the time. "He would," I say, warming at all the times my dad has slipped money into my account only for me to return it. And trust me, he's wanted to. But after I graduated college and got my first job, I refuse to take his money. I like to buy my own things, pay my own way. That was something Sean and I argued over a lot, too. I stopped myself from getting angry thinking of the arguments we used to get into. One time I gave my credit card to the waiter at a nice restaurant, and he was pissed for 2 days after, saying I made him look like a broke idiot who couldn't pay for his fiancé's dinner. That was one giant red flag that made me start to question everything with him. "Can I ask you something?" Elijah says, his brow still pinched. "Only if you promise to relax." Elijah raises an eyebrow at me. I am relaxed. My restraint crumbles, or maybe the wine is hitting my system, but I can't stop myself. I reach across the table and press my thumb into his forehead against where the skin is scrunched. The whole time, Elijah sits in his chair, his eyes watching me carefully. It doesn't escape me that his breath has picked up at my touch and nearness. "Didn't anyone ever tell you that if you keep your face a certain way for too long, it will get stuck that way?" I tease, moving my thumb across the textured skin. Elijah expels a breathy laugh, and his brow finally relaxes. Satisfied, I lower my hand and sit back in my chair. "See, was that so hard?" I ask. He beams and reaches for his glass, taking a long sip. "Thanks for your help." I make a silly salute. "Anytime." With a shake of his head and a long exhale, Elijah's shoulders relax too. I top off his wine for him after he sets it down, and then we settle back into our meals. We take a few more bites before I ask, "What was it you wanted to know?" He swallows his bite of food. "Honestly, this is more of a selfish thing to ask." "Oh?" I smirk. "Go on." He chuckles. "Oliver speaks about you quite often, but he never mentioned you got engaged or that you were even dating anyone. I wonder why he never spoke of it." I chew and swallow another bite of food as curiosity fills me. "Why is that selfish?" The hand that was bringing Elijah's wine to his lips pauses in midair. His brow almost furrows again, but he stops it. "It's only that your dad and I are close. That is a huge deal in your child's life, and he said nothing. It makes me think we aren't that close." "Oh, no, don't think that," I answer. It doesn't surprise me that he didn't say anything. He hated Sean. My dad hates all the men I date. Elijah's brow pinches once more, and I wonder why that made him bristle. But I soldier on. "Sean swept me off my feet with promises of settling down, babies, all the things I told him I wanted when we first started seeing each other. But Dad suspected from the beginning that he was dating me for some weird status thing, and to help get one of his new media businesses off the ground. Dad wasn't very happy when we got engaged, but he went along with it because he thought I was happy." "And you weren't?" Elijah asks. I shrug, pushing my near-empty plate away. "I was at first, or at least I think I was. Honestly, I don't know. I think I was happy with the idea of Sean more than anything. And eventually, from what I could tell, Dad was right. When I started talking about family plans more aggressively, our already meager wedding planning halted altogether. After months of nothing, I finally told him either he wanted a family with me or he didn't. His silence told me everything, so I broke it off." Elijah sets his fork down on his empty plate. "I'm sorry, Alex." "Don't be sorry. Do you want more food?" He pats his stomach. "If I eat any more, I'll burst. But thank you again. You didn't have to feed me after I intruded on your getaway." "Technically, we both kind of intruded on each other's getaways." "At least let me help you with the dishes." "You don't have to do that." "It's no trouble. I like doing dishes." My eyes narrow at him. "You're lying." A nice smile graces his lips, enough that he shows me his straight white teeth. "It's relaxing. I like the repetitiveness." "Interesting. I guess we make a good team then, because dishes are my least favorite part." "Then I'd be glad to help." "You wash, I dry?" I ask, pushing up from the table. Elijah stands with me, offering his hand like we're making a gentleman's agreement. "Deal," he says. With an amused smirk, I put my hand in his warm palm and shake. "Deal."
Chapter 6. Elijah. Working in tandem with Alex to clean up the kitchen brings into stark focus a domestic daydream that's almost primal. It's a simple act, one that's not new or extraordinary, but speaks to a part of myself I don't often acknowledge. Or perhaps, more truthfully, I haven't let myself acknowledge it since long before my divorce, when my marriage with Deb was new and I thought we'd wanted the same things. I dry my hands in the dish towel as Alex puts away the last of the plates. I allow myself to watch her profile for a moment. She's humming a tune, the low note soothing any last bit of nerves I had about being in the same room as my best friend's daughter. While the attraction I've been trying to deny is still there, I've enjoyed spending the last half hour getting to know her better, while we've worked as a team to wash and dry the dishes. Unlike me, Alex is an open book. I've asked her about her job a bit more, and if she ended up finding an apartment, sans roaches. Thankfully she did. One she's moving into after her 30th birthday next week. 30. I knew she had to be at least in her mid to late 20s after seeing her job profile earlier. But finding out she's about to be 30 shouldn't excite me as much as it does. It's nice to know our relationship wouldn't be completely inappropriate. I clench my jaw. There is no relationship, Elijah. You're here for one night, then you'll leave tomorrow and go back to your boring life where you'll work all day and go home to an empty house. As Alex folds the dish towel she's been using and turns to face me, I wonder if she feels lonely too. I related to what she said about getting out of a relationship with someone who didn't want the same things. I also can't deny that what she wants is what I want as well. Expressing her desire to settle down and start a family only added fuel to the already burning flame of my attraction to her. I'd be lying if I didn't admit there was a part of my brain that already started to picture what it would be like to have a life with her. It was easy to do. After she fed me a delicious meal, then we did dishes together with the kind of practiced ease married couples have. Alex smiles at me, her freckled cheeks stained a light pink. A normal occurrence for her because of her fair skin, I've realized. Thanks for doing that. I appreciate it. It was no trouble. She moves toward the island where our wine glasses sit almost empty. Do you have a preference for our next bottle? I set my now perfectly folded dish towel on the counter near the sink, making sure it's evenly lined up with the straight edge of the basin before turning back to her. She clearly saw what I'd done, and she's smiling wider because of it, but doesn't say anything. I should probably call it a night, I say, knowing that if I drink more wine with her, I'll end up forgetting that I shouldn't want my friend and boss's daughter. But when her face falls at my words, I can't help but think that allowing myself to be interested in her and not judging myself for it could really be a good thing. It's still fairly early, she says, looking at the microwave's digital clock. Unless your bedtime is 9 p.m.? When she finishes her sentence, the tease in her voice is evident. She traps her plump lower lip between her bottom teeth and grins at me. Maybe Alex is the devil in disguise, here to test my resolve. I'm not that ancient, I say, unable to stop myself from grinning back at her. I simply don't want to intrude on any more of your evening. That last part is a white lie. I most certainly do want to intrude on her evening. I also want to intrude on certain parts of her. Certain parts I couldn't help but imagine while I masturbated in the shower earlier. Like that lovely ass of hers. Oh, hush. She takes a step toward me. You know you're not. I enjoy your company. I enjoy yours as well, I admit. She sighs a breath of relief that sits like a warm drink in my belly. Then don't go to bed. I was thinking of using the hot tub, and you could join me. My parents installed a brand new one with lots of powerful jets. It will help you relax, Mr. Serious. I chuff, failing to keep images of Alex in a bathing suit out of my mind. I am relaxed. Her hand comes up, and like at the dinner table, she smooths the pinched skin of my brow. Whatever you say, Mr. Serious. But honestly, you have to enjoy a soak before you leave. One corner of my mouth lifts as she pulls her hand away. If you insist, I do. I exhale a resigned but amused breath. All right, then. I'll join you. She does the little excited bounce she likes to do, making the tops of her generous breasts jiggle. My cock stirs to life, and I'm hit with the realization I agreed to be in a hot tub with the most beautiful woman I've ever seen. The one I am trying not to be attracted to. God, I'm such an idiot. I've already got my suit on under my dress, she says. My eyes drag down her sundress-clad body like I have X-ray vision. When I meet her green gaze again, instead of blushing or trying to act like I didn't look, I hold eye contact and own what I just did. I think I can at least be an adult and stop pretending like I don't find her good-looking. There's no harm in that, right? Why don't you go change, and I'll get the hot tub ready? Her own gaze peruses my body now, as if me ogling her gives her permission to openly do the same to me. Which, in fairness, it does. And I can't say I mind it. Sounds good. She walks past me, our arms brushing as she slips by. The brief sensation sends a shiver up my spine. When I turn to watch her go, she's glancing over her shoulder at me with that devilish grin on her face. See you out there, Mr. Serious. When she's out of sight, I turn to the island and adjust myself for what seems like the millionth time in the last few hours. Then I grab my wine off the counter and down the remaining liquid in one gulp. This may be the second dumbest idea I've had today, the first of which was to stay overnight. Though the raw excitement in my gut feels as if it's trying to tell me otherwise, that maybe, just maybe, this could be a smart decision. Well, a fun and memorable, albeit stupid one, anyway.
Chapter 7. Alex. As the cool night air caresses my skin, making goosebumps erupt along my arms, I carefully place 2 fresh glasses of wine on the smooth surface surrounding the sunken hot tub. I make sure I space them near each other in hopes that Elijah will sit next to me. Is it a cheap move? Yes. But I want to see what he will do. I want to know if what I felt during our dinner together is real or if I'm making it up in my head because I want him to like me. Because I want him to show me what I think I already know, that he's interested in me. After the way he looked at me in the kitchen just now, and his over-gentlemanly and sweet actions since we've met, I think he is. I'm sure it's weird for him that I'm his friend's daughter, but again, like our age difference, I don't see a problem with it. It's not like I'd met Elijah before this. If anything, the fact he's friends with my dad gives me a little bit of hope, because then maybe he'd like someone I dated. I pick up one of the glasses of wine I just set down and take a sip. Why am I thinking about dating him? That's insane. Certifiably insane. I hear the sliding glass door open, and I turn to see the object of my thoughts standing there in all his half-naked glory. He's in a pair of dark blue swim trunks that almost look black in the porch light. They fit him like a glove, the edges tight enough that they accentuate the corded muscles of his thighs. But that's not what catches my attention. My mouth goes completely dry, all the moisture in my body going straight between my legs as I trail my eyes up the toned and tight muscles of his stomach. My gaze continues going up his happy trail to his taut chest and the smattering of dark and silver hair I saw peeking out of his shirt at dinner. That is why you're thinking of dating him, my brain says to me. I internally scold myself for being incredibly shallow, but I know his attractiveness is not the only thing drawing me to him. I feel a connection to him. How I told him about my life at dinner, how nice it was to do dishes together. It felt easy. Right. Elijah closes the door and takes the few steps needed to get to me, his eyes dropping down my bikini-clad body so quickly, I think he was hoping I'd miss it. I do a little cheer inside that he looked, then add a point to the bank in my brain that says he's attracted to me. He smiles, gaze darting to my wine. What did you choose this time? Oh, I say, trying to pull myself together. It's a Merlot, single vineyard. He hums. Notes? I take a sip and move it around my palate. Black plums, blueberries, dark chocolate. I taste again. And vanilla bean. His brows shoot up, and he nods his approval. You know your wines like Oliver. He taught me. We go to Napa every year together. It's a thing of ours. Oh, yes, I remember him saying something about that. I keep my focus locked on him, trying to get a read on if the mention of my dad made him uncomfortable like before. Thankfully, he seems fine, but I'm not going to test it further. Let's get in. It's a little chilly out here, I say. He holds out his hand, and I stare at it. I don't want you to slip as you get in. I press my lips together. Such a gentleman. While I would be fine getting in myself, I hold my wine in my left hand and give him my right as I walk the few steps down into the heated water. His grip is strong, and I savor the brief contact before I let go to sit down. I lean back against a cluster of powerful jets and sigh in delight as Elijah joins me, sitting exactly where I had placed his wine. I do another little cheer and add one more point to the like side in my brain. He takes his wine in hand and sips, then swallows another one before putting it down. We're sitting close enough that our thighs almost touch beneath the water, both facing the view of the lake. It's too dark to see right now, but if we listen close enough, we can hear the lapping of waves against the shore over the sound of the jets. Nice, isn't it? I ask Elijah after a moment of silence. It is. He leans back against the jets with a groan. It's been a long time since I've been in a hot tub. Same. You should see the view during sunset. It's beautiful. I'm sure it is, he says, staring at my face. The way he says it makes me think he's not referring to the sunset. If I wasn't already flushed from the hot water, I would blush more. So, why did you need a break for the weekend? I ask, not only to spark conversation, but because I genuinely want to know. According to Oliver, I work too much. Do you? I ask. He sinks further into the stream of the jets, his broad shoulders relaxing into the water. The movement causes our thighs to make contact. My eyes widen at the feeling, but to my surprise, Elijah doesn't try to pull away, nor does he apologize. Another point. If you would have asked me that on my drive up here, I would have said no, he muses. And now? He shifts, his muscular thigh sliding against mine. I'm realizing that Mr. Serious has been out to play for far too long. My entire body feels as if it's been covered in popping candy. My skin zips and tingles, and my thighs press together as another tiny bolt of lightning strikes me between my legs. Before I can think about what I'm doing, I shift so I'm turned toward him and rest my hand on the top of his thigh beneath the water. Elijah doesn't flinch at my touch. Instead, he holds eye contact like he does every time we speak. But this time it's different. Darker. Even in the dim light, I can see the desire in his eyes. There's no denying he wants me, too. Alex, he says headily, this is a bad idea. But nothing in his tone or body language says this is bad at all. What if I like bad ideas? I ask teasingly, gently sliding my hand up his thigh. I only stop when my fingers meet the outline of his very prominent erection. Elijah curses under his breath, but he still doesn't pull away. Instead, his body slips down the hot tub wall, so my palm now rests over the very large bulge beneath his swim trunks. I internally pat myself on the back for correctly guessing that this man, in fact, does have a big dick to go with his BDE. Alex, he sighs, his voice almost pained. I cup him, then gently squeeze until he groans. How long has it been since someone's touched you, Elijah? He swallows, a long moment passing before he says, "A long time." I gently grip him again so his eyes roll in the back of his head. "How long?" 2 years, he chokes out. I try to keep the shock off my face. A man like him hasn't had anyone touch him in 2 years? I find it hard to believe, but I don't think he's lying. He has no reason to. I stroke my hand up his clothing-covered cock, brushing my thumb over the thick crown of it. "Can I make you feel good, Elijah?" I rub my own thighs together at the thought of being the first one to touch him in so long, to take him in my mouth and watch this serious, beautiful man come apart for me, to have him grab my hair and use me how he wants. The filthy images continue to pile on as I wait for an answer. I move closer to his body, the pressure from my hand on his cock increasing as I slide the tops of my wet breasts against his arm. "Please," I purr into his ear, rubbing my nose along the shell of it. His cock jumps beneath my hand, and I bite down on his earlobe. It may be excessive, but I feel like a woman driven by pure aching need for him. It's unlike anything I've ever felt before. "I'm going to hell," he groans. "But God help me. Yes." His blown-out pupils connect with mine as he says it. "Take care of me, Alex." That's all I need to close the distance between us, my lips sealing over his in a burning kiss. If he's going to hell, then I'm going to hell with him.